Hello and welcome to the Weekly Stuff Podcast with Jonathan Lack.
And Sean Chapman.
We are here to talk about stuff. This week on the show, Doctor Who traveled back to 1955, Red Dead Redemption 2 caused some waves, and I've been playing and watching a lot of different Dragon Ball stuff. We're going to talk about all of that and more.
Cool.
I thought I'd do it more like a radio opening this week, I guess. I didn't plan on that, but that's what it sounded like.
Well, that's where we are. It's a bit of a grab bag episode.
It's a grab bag
again.
week, yeah.
Yeah.
So, yes, we will talk about this week's Doctor Who. We will talk about some of the news. We will talk about I'm enmeshed in Dragon Ball stuff, and I'm very, very happy about it. So we'll talk about all of that. What have you been up to, Sean?
A couple of things. I am, inches away from finishing Dragon Quest XI.
Nice.
I would have finished Dragon Quest XI today, but as I was telling you, Jonathan, before we started recording, I spent most of this Sunday destroying a bush that is in our yard that apparently was too unruly for our local homeowners association. So, it had to be taken down. It had to be executed. I didn't want to do it, but I had to do it. So that took a lot of time. But I am...
Describe the bush to me. I'm sorry. For our listeners, what made it so... Because, homeowners associations, for those who don't have to deal with them, are little bureaucratic nightmares. They do some good things, but they also, as I was saying to Sean, I think they exist because people have too much time on their hands. What about this bush was so offensive to your neighborhood?
I mean, it was a big bush. I don't know.
Okay.
It was to be fair, it wasn't incredibly well kempt because neither myself nor my parents have enough time to just go fucking trim bushes every week or whatever, some people apparently do with their time. It's nowhere near I take pretty regular walks around the neighborhood, and it is nowhere near the most egregious lawn thing. It's also in the backyard, so nobody fucking sees it anyway. So I don't know. It was a big bush. It is now basically nothing. It is very. I cut it down to size.
Well, let's pour one out for the bush. It died so that the homeowners association could live, I guess.
Or they could just be drunk on power for one more day. Since I was doing that, I did not finish Dragon Quest XI like I had planned, but I am so incredibly close. It's the kind of thing where all of my people are level 99.
Nice.
I'm about to go into the last boss fight kind of area. I've done all the optional random shit you can do in the post game and walked all around the place and went everywhere and did all the shit. And it's just literally, I basically need to walk into a room and then just smoke some boss that is not prepared for a level 99 party, I'm assuming.
It's hard. I wouldn't be that confident. I think it expects you to be level 99.
Okay, so maybe that fight will be a little bit more than the last couple of little kind of extra things I've been mopping up in that game.
Yeah.
Other than Dragon Quest XI, there are a couple of other pieces of stuff that I did that I want to talk about. The first one is looking at me right in the face right now off screen. There was a Criterion Collection sale a couple of days ago.
There was. I have a haul I can show off.
Yes, but mine is something I have been wanting to buy for a long time and just have held off, and I just got the irresistible urge and had enough money on hand that I just got the Zatoichi set, Jonathan.
Yeah, Zatoichi.
So
That's
I just have them all. It is easily the coolest piece of home media I own. It is just an incredible box set. The art is so gorgeous. It's all done in these really distinctive primary colors that show off a bunch of different scenes from across the whole series. You, of course, get the 25 movies. They don't have the last one, which we talked about a couple of weeks ago on the podcast. The other company owns that. So if you want to get the 26th Zatoichi movie, that one is available elsewhere. But they have, obviously, 25 of the 26 films, the original cycle of films. They have a nice little booklet you get that has an essay at the front. It has a very useful sort of assortment of, it goes through all the different movies and has little art on it for each of the different movies. And all the illustrations for each film is done by a different artist, which is really cool. So they're all in different styles. And it is also incredibly helpful because it gives you a little sort of paragraph, maybe 2-paragraph-ish length kind of short review and synopsis of each film. So if you're flipping through this and you're like me and you've already seen all these movies and you're looking and you say, well, what the fuck? Which one is Zatoichi on the Road? Which one is that movie? I don't remember. I don't remember which one is Zatoichi on the Road as opposed to Zatoichi the Fugitive or Zatoichi's Flashing Sword or Fight Zatoichi Fight. They're not the most descriptive titles in the world. So having a little bit of a plot synopsis in this booklet is actually very useful for if you're like trying to remember which one is that one I wanted to see. You can flip through this and kind of get to it pretty quickly. And then also a thing I didn't realize was in this set that's really cool is in the back of the little booklet, they actually have a translation of the original short story by Kan Shimozawa, from which the character originates. And I think I haven't read it yet, but I'm pretty sure the first movie is kind of based on that short story.
Criterion's pretty good about doing that. If the source material is really rare, they will often get a nice translation in there. Like Sancho the Bailiff comes with, I think, 2 different source stories, and they've translated both of those. Some just come with full books. Like, oh man, there's one of them I have that is just like the original novel that was out of print, so they put it back into print and just put it with the thing like that. That's always crazy when they do things like that. Yeah, Criterion, they hit home runs.
Yeah, so that's awesome. I'm really excited to read that story. And then, of course, you have a really nice, concise sort of booklet thing, or booklet-shaped thing that they do to package all the movies.
Digibook.
So while yes, a digibook. So while it is 25 films, it's actually really compact, and it's a lot smaller than I was expecting when I ordered it. And yeah, so you have 3 movies per disc, and then the last disc has 1 movie, and then all the supplemental features like documentaries and stuff on it. So this set is fucking awesome if people are interested in Zatoichi and want the physical versions. Because obviously if you have Filmstruck, you can watch all these movies on there. But it's the kind of thing that I don't want these movies held ransom by some sort of streaming service that I don't know how long it will exist for. So,
and I assume they look better on Blu-ray.
Yes, yeah. So I love this set. I only got it in yesterday, so I haven't had a chance to really do much with it, but it is just the coolest fucking looking thing in the world. And they are basically all really good movies. So if you are at all curious with Zatoichi, when it was on sale for half off, it's only $100, which is really an amazing price for something like that. So
yeah,
it's awesome.
I did not get it in this sale. Zatoichi is a perennial wishlist item for me, where I have it on my Criterion wishlist, and then every time there's a sale, there's a lot of other things I need to get, and so I don't wind up. I get up a lot of the other things, and then Zatoichi kind of sits on the sidelines. I think I might finally do it for the November sale that's going to be coming up at Barnes & Noble. Because you can usually get some gift cards and stuff and get even further discounts. This year's sale, this week's flash sale, I got their new edition of Andrei Rublev, which is the Andrei Tarkovsky film that is one of their first ever releases. It was Criterion Collection Spine number 36, so it was a really early DVD edition, and they've finally come back around and gotten a Blu-ray out with the shorter 3-hour cut, the longer 3.5-hour cut, a bevy of bonus features. It's got some of the most beautiful artwork they've ever done. It's really cool. And then I picked up a Japanese film, Gate of Hell, a classic that I did not have and was only $15. And I also picked up the last Edward Yang film they have that I did not have, which was Yi Yi. And I'm excited to watch all of those. But yes, Criterion sales are good. And 25 films for $100 is pretty good, because I paid $60 and I only got 3 films. So
exactly. Yes. Yeah. And yeah, Zatoichi's awesome. The other thing I did that I've over the past couple of days that I can talk about is I started watching the House on Haunted Hill, which is the new sort of Netflix show, that they have every once in a while. They have these weird fucking shows. It just had no fanfare. I hadn't heard about anything about it until it was just on there. And obviously it's all 10 episodes. And I've watched the first 4 now, because I've been watching kind of 2 a night, and I started 2 nights ago. And it's really good. It's got an interesting pace to it that I think kind of fixes some of my issues that we've both had with different Netflix shows over the years, most notably a lot of the Marvel stuff, like Jessica Jones has these really big pacing issues. And the House on Haunted Hill, it being this horror series that also has a really strong sort of family drama dynamic to it, it balances these two different genres at the same time to make the slow build, long episode pace of these Netflix shows a lot more palatable to me. If you don't know what House on Haunted Hill is, it's based on a book by Shirley Jackson that's really famous from a couple of decades ago. And it's about it's sort of split between two different time periods. One in the past where all the main characters are children and are living in Hill House, which is obviously haunted. And then a huge sort of thing happens, and this huge haunting event happens, and their mother ends up dead, probably killed herself through some sort of ghost-related shenanigans, and they're all deeply traumatized. And then the other time period is in the present day, where all the five siblings who are the main characters are all adults and dealing with the trauma of that haunting from their past. And then also an event happens at the end of the first episode that kind of starts bringing them back together towards Hill House. And so it has these like kind of parallel storyline, this parallel storyline structure that makes it so that when you have these like 50-minute or hour-long episodes that in like, again, like Luke Cage or Jessica Jones or in like some of the weaker episodes of Stranger Things could feel really interminable, House on Haunted Hill, I think, like balances that stuff much better because you have the tension of the horror stuff and the tension of the family drama stuff kind of building on top of each other. So there's always something really interesting kind of brewing. And it never, at least 4 episodes in, it has not had the sort of wheel spinning problem that I was worried about based on other Netflix series. And so if people are, I'll probably talk about more about it once I have watched all of it by next week. But if people are interested in picking up something horror related that is new for like Halloween, I have had a lot of fun just kind of getting into the Halloween mood and kind of the October spirit with this. It's really well made, and the acting is utterly fantastic, and their ability to cast child actors from the past period with the modern day actors is really, really sort of striking. And yeah, it's a cool series, and I'd recommend people check it out.
Awesome. I have not watched a new Netflix show, I think, since BoJack Horseman, the most recent season, so that sounds like a cool one. They've got a lot of TV, but that sounds neat. I've heard a lot of people talking about it. I did not know what it was about until just now.
Yes, it's cool. I'm really excited to sort of see it build because, again, it's 10 episodes, so I'm about halfway through, and it feels like that middle episode is going to be a big turning point where things shift. So I'm
awesome.
excited to see how it develops.
Okay, so Sean, my stuff, I've had a weird week because I've got some cool stuff to talk about, but then I also, over the last 3 days, went on a bit of a miniature world tour. And by world tour, I went to California and back with a pit stop in our home state of Colorado, and it was very stressful. I hate traveling. I like traveling in some cases. If I have to fucking fly... And I did have to fucking fly, because I could drive to California. It would have taken like a week. So I didn't do that. And I flew to California, and that was a goddamn mistake, because flying sucks. I hate flying. I hate everything about it. It's no fun. It should be fun. You're going up in the sky. You are breaking the boundaries of gravity. You are giving God the middle finger and saying, I can fly. And somehow we've taken that and made it a soul-crushing, horrific experience of discomfort and anxiety. Anyway, I won't rant about that too much. But yes, I went to California. I was going there for an academic conference. I was presenting a paper, which, Sean, I'm going to go ahead and read you the title of my paper because it's horrible, but okay. It makes me laugh. The title of this paper, this was a conference San Francisco State puts on every year in film studies, and this year it was the topic was on failed cinema, as they were calling it. So movies that in some way could be conceived of or were received of as failures, and we were writing about those in a critical context. And so I was presenting a paper there, and when I submitted my abstract to see if they wanted to have me, I didn't have a title, and I was like, okay, well, you know what, I'll crap out a title, and I'll figure out a better one later, or they'll tell me to come up with a better one, because this is not a good title. So I was doing something about the recent Ava DuVernay film, A Wrinkle in Time, which I thought was, I think, very unfairly categorized as a failure when it came out. And so my paper is called A Wrinkle in Discourse, Celebrating Normalcy and Weighing Perspective in Ava DuVernay's A Wrinkle in Time.
Yeah.
Yeah, It's bad. It's a bad title. It's a great paper. I think it turned out really well. You can DM me on Twitter if you want to read it. I'll get you a PDF or something. It's not published anywhere yet. It probably will be, but that's a forthcoming thing. But if you would like to read it, I can get you access to it. But the title was definitely something where I'm like, I have a weird talent where I have a good talent of making titles that sound like they're making fun of academic paper titles, and then you submit them and you realize, oh wait, there's no irony in academia. There's no title too silly for academia. They'll take anything. You can just make it utter gibberish. My title, at least, is not gibberish. It is what my paper's about. It's just stupid. So yeah, that was the title. The rest of it was better, as I said, but I just wanted to make fun of the title for a minute because I didn't do a good job with it.
Yeah, I like how you say that it's like, oh, your title is like you're trying to be ironic and poke fun at academic essay titles, but it's like that's the most, like if you just go into like JSTOR or any academic database and search for anything, that is exactly the kind of bullshit that pops up immediately. Is a wrinkle in discourse. And
maybe that's a good bad talent to have, but I don't know. Anyway, the rest of it was better. So it was a lovely conference, met some nice people. It was good. My flight out there was delayed by a full 4 hours, Sean. So I got to spend 4 hours in the Des Moines airport, which is fine. The Des Moines airport is a lovely little airport. It's very small, but the upside of that is it's relatively more quiet. It's staffed by very nice people, the nicest TSA agents I have ever met. I'll tell one story about the TSA here. This was just the most Iowa TSA agent who I think could exist. I was going through, they were scanning my backpack, and something went off. And the guy took my backpack, and I said, oh, is there something wrong? And he said, oh, I don't know, but we'll see. And he's like, let's just take a look through here. Well, shall we? You come over here. And so I came over there with him, and he's like, oh, here it is. You've got this water bottle. I had my, aluminum water bottle with me. He said, do you have anything in here? And I'm like, I think I filled it up with some water. And he said, we're not supposed to let that through. So if you'll follow me, we're going to go over to that water fountain. And we went over to the water fountain. He said, I'm just going to pour this out. Here you go. If you want to fill it back up, you can. I just couldn't let you through with the liquid in there. And I'm like, okay. And he's like, you have a nice day, sir. And just knowing the TSA, the way that would have gone in like Denver or something is, I don't know, they would have called me a fuckface or something. Like, they're generally not the nicest people.
They would have emptied the water bottle over your head.
Yes, that's what they would have. I mean, they would have taken my water bottle and I would have never seen it again. That's what would have happened. Yeah. So that was very nice. But that was a very, very Iowa style of TSA agent. So I liked that. Anyway, so 4 hour delay. I missed most of the first day of the conference. Luckily, I was presenting on the second day. I was not able to go out to the beach in San Francisco because I did not really have time, and I was staying near the coast, but not near a beach. I was able to see the ocean through a chain link fence, and that was nice. It also felt like a weird allegory for something that I'm still working through. And then the second day, I was able to present my paper. It was very nice. Went over very well. People liked it. And met some new people, and that was good. But I had a very long day because I woke up Thursday, went to the conference, presented, had the whole day there, went back to the San Francisco airport, flew out at midnight, got into Denver at 4 a.m. My brother picked me up from the airport. I went home, got a little bit of sleep, but not a ton. And then I hung out with my family for the day and saw my dogs, which was great, Phoebe and Sunny. And we played a lot of fetch and had a lot of fun. And then I had to go back to the airport. My brother drove me back at about 1:30 in the afternoon because my flight was at 3. That flight got delayed by an hour and a half, and we had to switch gates and all this stuff. So that was just a bundle of fun, and then got back. But Frontier, they're a great company. They really rewarded me for all the delays and troubles on this trip. They gave me a $25 voucher for a future flight.
$25, huh?
Yeah. It's like, we delayed you by a total of about 6 to 7 hours on this trip, but you can save $25 on a future flight on our incredibly shitty airline. So
yeah, I feel like you could have made $25 panhandling for 6 to 7 hours.
I really could have. What I mostly did is I worked on a lecture I'm giving this coming week on Yasujiro Ozu. And it is, because I had a lot of hours to kill in the airport, it's the best goddamn PowerPoint on Ozu anyone's ever made, because it's very exacting, because trust me, it's just not easy to do. It's just, you got to get shit done when you're in an airport, because otherwise you just feel gross and sick. Mm-hmm. So airports are not my favorite place in the world. But yeah, that was my trip. It was fun. I got to see some people. I did not see you, Sean. I'm sad I couldn't help you with the bush, but I was not in Denver very long.
No, the timing is almost making me suspicious of maybe you are the reason why I had to get this bush. Maybe you swooped in, fucking dropped by the homeowners association, and is like, hey, that fucking bush at Sean's house.
At 4:30 in the morning, I had Thomas drive by your house, and I'm like, let's see if we can find any foliage out of place in Sean's house, and then we're gonna call up the homeowners association. I guess we're in the same HOA probably.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we are.
Yeah, since we're in the same neighborhood, or were. So yeah, maybe I did. Who knows? You'll never know. It's all anonymous.
I'll conduct my own investigation, and
Okay.
if this bush was unlawfully executed by my hand, I'm going to go after some motherfuckers. That's all I'm saying.
So I had a good little trip. The worst part of my trip, though, Sean, is that I was right in the middle of the Future Trunks arc of Dragon Ball Super when I left.
Oh,
And
fuck.
for 3 days now, for about 72 hours, I haven't been able to watch Dragon Ball Super, and I'm itching for it. Right now on this podcast, I'm just itching because I want to go back and watch more of that show. Because Dragon Ball Super, Sean, it doesn't just get good, it gets really fucking good. Oh my god. I wrote to myself here, the Future Trunks arc feels like it's the closest we'll ever get to Dragon Ball deciding to be a prestige television drama for a little while. Like, that's not something I ever thought I needed, but it pulls it off really well, and it still blends in a bunch of great, Toriyama-style humor. You've still got the Pilaf gang is there, and Goku is being funny and all that. But, like, when the Future Trunks arc starts, and they want to just go for the gut in a couple of spots, they go for the fucking gut. Like, those first 2 episodes telling how Trunks gets back to the past again are incredibly impactful and dramatic and well done, and it never really falls off from there. Like, they do so much interesting stuff with the characters. There's an episode where Trunks goes and meets present-day Gohan, who would be the same age as the Gohan who trained him in his original timeline. But this Gohan, of course, is not a fighter anymore. He has a family. I think that is one of the single best episodes in the 600-plus episodes of the Dragon Ball media franchise, just in terms of how it humanizes the basics of this story in such a beautiful way. I think the way it uses Trunks, Vegeta, and Goku as characters in all of this is just outstanding. I think the new characters like Zamasu are just amazing, and all the stuff with him and just trying to figure out what is this guy's deal, because Zamas, he feels to me like if Light Yagami from Death Note were a Dragon Ball villain, that's who he would be. Like, if you made him a Dragon Ball deity and gave him just endless power, that's who he would become. But the best part is Goku Black, or the character they just call Black, which is great for the English subtitles because they have to figure out how to make it sound slightly less awkward when it is, when you have things like, someone saying, man, this black fellow sure is causing trouble, and you're like,
Yeah.
ooh boy, in a different context that would sound wrong. I know they don't mean anything by it, it's Japan, but still. But the best part, of course, is that Goku Black is just Masako Nozawa again, playing her third evil version of Goku. She's done this twice before with Tullus in movie 3, and Bardock, who's basically an evil Goku, and this one is somehow the best. Like, every line out of Masako Nozawa as Goku Black just kind of sends chills down my spine. She is so ludicrously effective. You can just hear her, like, just cackling with glee in the vocal booth, sometimes literally because the character has a great evil laugh. But, man, I love that they're thinking, like, oh, we got this big new arc, we're going to have Future Trunks back, who should the big bad be? Looking around and being like, we have the best voice actor in the entire fucking world here. Let's just let her do it, And that's what they did. And it's a great arc. And it is also, I think, the first time since I read through and watched Dragon Ball as a kid that I've genuinely been surprised by this series. As in, like, I don't know where it's going. I'm at the midpoint. They've revealed some stuff, but I don't know, like, the exact identity of Goku Black or what Zamas's total master plan is. And I can kind of predict where some of it is going, but there's a lot where it's just like, I don't know where these chips are going to fall. I don't know how they're going to win this one. I don't know what the villain's whole motivation is. It's genuinely unpredictable. And again, for someone who's had Dragon Ball in their life, their entire life, it's like, it really is crazy. It feels like going home again in a weird way, of that. I never thought there would be new Dragon Ball that would feel this vital and engaging and surprising to me, and it absolutely is. And I know I'm late to the party on this one, but goddamn, it's so good.
Yeah, it really is. Like, that quality of it is one of the things that I really love about the Future Trunks one, and specifically is it does that. It feels like they kind of pulled some of the cool stuff that the Cell arc did, and it specifically so much of that kind of first half of them establishing stuff and exploring these mysteries reminds me of what is one of my favorite episodes of Dragon Ball Z, which is them finding the second time machine that Cell came in. And that's where, like, what you're saying about the Future Trunks arc in Super, it has the same element of, like, what the fuck is going on? Like, I thought we were just dealing with some androids or some shit. It's like this is like this. There's a whole other dimension of what we're dealing with that I didn't even know about, and it's that like really palpable mystery that is not, I think, like intrinsic to most Dragon Ball. Like it pops up in a little bit of places, but it's mostly that little section in the early Android Cell stuff that it really has that. And I think it feels like a very intentional decision on the part of the people making Super that when they bring back the future Trunks character, they bring back some of that sort of tone and style that was only really in that one part of Dragon Ball Z.
Yeah, and that's I think you and I are probably in agreement on this, that's the best part of Dragon Ball Z is the entire Cell saga, as we would broadly define it. It's Toriyama writing by the seat of his pants in the absolute best way possible, you know? And I think it's the peak of the Z era of the series, at least. And Super definitely recaptures some of that tone, but it also doesn't just feel like a rehash at all. Mm-hmm. Like, it sounds like the most cynical cash grab arc. You know, we're going to bring future Trunks back and we're going to have an evil Goku. That does not sound imaginative on the surface, but it is so imaginative. I love it. I even love just some of the times where it's like, it just plays fast and loose with some of the continuity, and it doesn't care, because that's such a Toriyama thing to do. You know? Again, this is the guy who, before you even get to the Z portion of the series, blew up the moon twice because he forgot he did it the first time. Like, continuity is not a big deal in Dragon Ball, so fuck it. Trunks has blue hair now. We're never going to explain how his hair changed color or why young Trunks still has purple hair. We're just going to do it because, frankly, it looks cooler. I love Trunks with blue hair. It's great. Yeah. You know, are we going to fully explain how Mai is also young in the other timeline and hasn't grown even though... No, we don't need to. We're just going to go past it. Actually, the Dragon Ball Super manga does explain that, and it's very, very funny. If you have not seen the bonus chapter where they explain the whole continuity error around the character Mai, it's hilarious, so I would recommend that. But yes, it's so fucking good. I even think one part of Super that I generally think is weaker is the music by Norihito Sumitomo. I like it. It's just not. It does not hold a candle to me to the original Shunsuke Kikuchi music. I think it gets much better in the future Trunks arc. There's some really striking compositions, and I feel like it kind of comes into its own tonally as, okay, this isn't the Dragon Ball music I remember, but it's very effective for the story they're telling now, and I guess that's what's most important, you know?
Yeah, and I feel like the music continues to get better throughout the series, because it wasn't I didn't really notice the music much in this series until the Tournament of Power arc, where they start doing some like really crazy shit with the music.
That's awesome. And also the animation, they've mostly ironed out at this point in the series, and some of it, especially all the future stuff with the ruined city and all that, is extremely impressive. So I'm loving it. As soon as this podcast's done, I'm probably going to go pop my Blu-rays back in. And I will soon run out of Blu-rays, and I will be switching over to the Crunchyroll versions, which there's nothing wrong with, except I've been watching Funimation DVDs of Dragon Ball for so long. I'm so used to how Steve Simmons, the guy who does the subtitles at Funimation, does it, that when I see Dragon Ball subtitled by literally anyone else, it's always weird to me, because they don't always... And I know Crunchyroll does weird stuff, like they exclusively use dub terminology, which is kind of weird to me. But I'm excited to just be able to press forward and get this series out of the way, because it's so good.
Yes, and you are well on track to be done well before the new movie comes out. So that's good.
I'm near the halfway point of the series. In fact, I'm at volume 5. There will be 10 Blu-ray volumes, because the math works out almost exactly, given that they do 13 per volume. So at the end of this Blu-ray volume, I will be at the halfway point of Dragon Ball Super. So I'm excited for that. All right, and speaking of Dragon Ball, I've also been playing a lot of Dragon Ball FighterZ. That's pretty much what I do. So I watch Dragon Ball Super, and in my leisure time, and in leisure time when I'm not watching something, I play Dragon Ball FighterZ, and it's fun. And I'm working my way through the story mode right now, just because I want to get to the end of it and have it out of the way and unlock Android 21. The story mode is so bad. It's fun because you get to like play the basic fighting game. It's you can kind of, treat it as like a glorified training mode, I guess, but it is the most gibberish story I think I've ever seen in a licensed video game. I don't get it. That there's the whole thing about like the link mechanic, and that there's a soul in the body that is actually the player, and it is utter and complete gibberish, but it can be kind of fun at times, and the fighting is still really cool and stylish. And I am debating with myself whether or not I will someday soon plop the ridiculous amount of money down needed for the season pass for all the characters, because it is wildly, wildly overpriced DLC, but I also kind of want it.
It's fucking I would never be able to go back to playing that game and not having Vegito. I need him. He is my boy, and I need him.
Yes. So I do want that because the DLC characters look pretty cool. You've told me about them. I think there's some creative choices in there. But I have to say, Sean, it's not, looking at like the 8 fighters they've released as DLC, it's not quite the 8 in my heart of hearts I would want. And I've been thinking about, what set of characters would make me plop down the $35 that they charge for the season pass right now, which I will note is more than you would buy Dragon Ball FighterZ right now for at Best Buy or Amazon, because it's a physical game and has gone way down in price. But if I wanted to spend more than the game itself on DLC, what characters would it need? And Sean, I've made a top 10 list.
Okay, even though there's only 8 characters, you've made a top 10 list. Okay.
Yes, well, you can just chop off the last 2. Maybe they're just for fun. But I had like more than 10, and so I thought I'd whittle it down, and I just wound up with 10. Here are the top 10 fighters I want to see in future Dragon Ball FighterZ DLC. Because I don't think their cuts are deep enough. They don't go far enough back in the series. They don't go deep enough into the series. Here's the 10 I want. Number 10, Chaozu. We should have Chaozu in there, and he should have his super when you have 3 energy bars and you do your like quarter circle R1, is he latches onto the person, self-destructs, he dies, and maybe he takes down like half their health, but probably not even that. He's utterly worthless, but he would be a good gag character to fight with.
I mean, Tien does have a Chaozu special that he can trigger where Chaozu flies in from off the side of the screen. Shit. Does his Nappa thing and dies, and Tien just goes Chaozu, and then you can only use that super once per match because Chaozu's fucking dead.
Okay, I did not know they had that because I don't fight with Tenshinhan much, so I'm removing Chaozu and I'll go to one of my backup lists. My number 10 is now. I want them to figure out how to do this. I want the Pilaf gang.
Okay, yes,
and it's all 3 of them. Kind of Captain Ginyu is the whole Ginyu force. Something like that. It's the Pilaf gang, and I think Pilaf would be like your main fighter, but he doesn't actually do anything. He just directs Mai and Shu to fight for him. That's how it would be.
Would they be in the big robot suits they're in the original Dragon Ball, or is it normal them?
I don't know, because you would also have to do, are you doing like the Dragon Ball Super versions where they're little kids? Would you do the original versions where they're adults? I think there's a lot of possibilities, so I'm just going to put Pilaf gang out there. I think it would be a very hard character to make, but I think Arc System Works has the talent to do it.
Yeah, I think one of the barriers for a character like the Pilaf gang is that there are multiple mechanics in the game that basically necessitate the characters to be able to fly. So that's always one of those ones that's like, do you just do the fucking like Mr. Satan thing of just give him a fucking jetpack because of whatever?
That's what I was going to say. I would love the Mr. Satan thing with the jetpack, but yes, who knows? Maybe if they're in the suits can fly.
Yeah.
All right, my number 9 is a character a lot of people forget exists, but I love him. It's Dabura from the Boo arc. He's just cool. He's not around long. He's like around for like half a volume in the manga. I don't know how many episodes that is. But he's really fucking cool. He looks neat, and I'm just thinking about how fucking cool he would look with the Arc System Works like animation style, and how many fun things they could do with him there. I think that would be awesome.
Yeah, I mean, he has the spit that turns people to stone is a unique thing that really only he does. So there's something there, and
he looks like what Akira Toriyama would draw if he were drawing the devil, and it's neat. Yeah, I love it. All right, number 8, Grandpa Gohan. I think we want Grandpa Gohan in there. People be like, Grandpa Gohan's dead at the start of the series, and I'm like, yes, but there is an arc where they do a tournament, and it's with fortune teller Baba, and he comes back, and he's fighting, and Goku doesn't know it's him, and then he does know it's him, and it's the most emotion Goku ever shows in Dragon Ball when he breaks into tears because his grandpa is back from the dead for one day, and he's fighting him, and it's really neat, and I think Grandpa Gohan should be there. Because it would be heartwarming. If Goku and Grandpa Gohan were fighting, the like opening animation would be Goku falling into tears.
Yes, I would 100% agree with this one.
Yes,
give me Gohan. I really appreciate that they put Grandpa Gohan in Dragon Quest XI for us.
Yes,
but I also want him in a Dragon Ball game.
They did. All right, number 7. I'm honestly surprised this one is not in the game yet. Kame Sennin.
Okay,
we need Kame Sennin. Doesn't he fight in the Tournament of Power?
Yes, he is in that arc.
Yeah.
So
I'm just saying, in Super, he has come back and canonically started fighting again. We know he can do all this stuff. They have already some stuff in Super where you have characters who are technically underpowered, and, they just find fun ways for them to be, or, like, you can beat Beerus with Yamcha if you want. in Dragon Ball Super. It has no, like, canonicity, but you can do it. Why not be able to do it with Kame Sennin? He's definitely more powerful than Yamcha.
Yeah. You would have to, like, because it's like, because again, another character that can't really fly, so you either have to give him a jetpack or give him Gamera. Don't they just call that flying turtle Gamera in Dragon Ball? Isn't it literally just called Gamera?
It's just Kame, I thought. I think they just call him Turtle.
No, but no, that's like not just the turtle that lives at the Kame house, but yeah, he has the little spinning Gamera turtle that he rides on.
They call it Gamera, yes, you're correct.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I was misinterpreting which turtle. But yes.
Yes. So you either give him that. I also would just love have his level 3 super be a transformation super where he goes super buff.
Yes.
Because there's not enough transformation supers in the game. Like base Goku, the DLC character, has like the Kaioken. Frieza can go Golden Frieza, and then like adult Gohan has a little bit with his level 1 super that kind of gives him a little bit of extra abilities, but he doesn't really transform much.
Yeah.
I want a transformation where a character that is scrawny becomes really big because I think that's cool in fighting games.
Awesome. All right, my number 6 is Pan from Dragon Ball GT, so specifically the version we see in GT. I've always loved, like, GT is an up and down show. I love Pan, though. I think she's a great character. She was really cool. She's got a great character design with, like, the red outfit and everything, like the little bandana. And she's just a cool little badass character. And she can fly, and she can be super and all that stuff. So I think Pan should be in the game, and I think that would be fun.
Yes, they would also with Pan be able to fix one of, I think, the biggest issues with GT and have her in her level 3 super just go Super Saiyan. Like, I don't give a shit that they didn't have in GT, because Bardock as a DLC character, his level 3 super, he goes fucking Super Saiyan from that one bullshit episode Bardock thing they did. Just do it with Pan. It blows my mind to this day that Pan never went Super Saiyan in Dragon Ball GT, when fucking Goten goes Super Saiyan when he's like 8 years old. Pan's way more badass than Goten ever was, and she never gets to go Super Saiyan. It's fucking sexist.
Yes, so they should do that with Pan. I think it would be great. My number 5, though, is her mother. I want Videl in the game. I love Videl. Videl's just a great character. I'm always a little sad that on Super she's just basically at this point just become Gohan's housewife. And she's still really cool, and I love having Videl around. But one of my favorite stretches is when she and Gohan are, getting close and training and all that stuff, and she's just really cool and badass, and I want Videl to fight in the game, because again, if Yamcha can fight Beerus in Dragon Ball FighterZ, then Videl could definitely fight Beerus in Dragon Ball FighterZ.
Yes. I mean, she can fly.
She already
has a leg up from a lot of the other characters.
Yes. All right. My top 4, I think, are really good, and if they just did these 4, I'd plop the fucking $40 down for it. Number 4, Piccolo Daimao, the original King Piccolo, evil old Piccolo form. We need that. Piccolo is great in any form, but, if Goku can have 5 different characters in the game, I think Piccolo should at least have one other character, and I would like King Piccolo, and I would like it if you could defeat him by flying through his chest.
Yes.
You should have Piccolo Daimao. That'd be cool.
I agree.
All right. Number 3, again, I am genuinely surprised this is not a character yet, Jocko the Galactic Patrolman.
Yeah. I mean, he's in a lot of Dragon Ball Super.
He's in a lot of it. I'm always surprised.
There's a lot of room for Jocko.
Yeah. He's in there a lot. He can fight. He is not like a Super Saiyan or anything, but he can hold his own. He is like supernaturally strong. He's got a bunch of cool gadgets, and he's really funny and has a bunch of funny poses. And clearly, the Arc System Works people find that very entertaining based on how they do things like Captain Ginyu and stuff like that. So I think they could have fun with Jocko. My number 2, we're going with a deep cut here, Sean. The assassin Tao Pai Pai.
Yes. His level 3 super is he just sticks his tongue through your skull.
You could do that. I was thinking he would do the thing where he throws the like plank of wood and gets on it and just zooms across the world by being on a tree.
Yes, I think that would just be one of his special moves. Okay. That would just be a normal like quarter circle forward punch, and
that sounds right.
Like depending on which button you do, it like changes the angle or something.
Yes. There are so many things you could do with Tao Pai Pai. You could even have an alternate Tao Pai Pai that is the cyborg Tao Pai Pai. But you gotta have Tao Pai Pai in the game. They have not dipped into original Dragon Ball, like pre-Z whatsoever in this game yet. And if you're gonna do it, I feel like you have to do Tao Pai Pai. He's so cool. Get him in one of these games.
Fuck yeah.
Fuck yeah. And my number 1, they should really do this one. Child Goku. Little Goku. He is Goku for most of the original run of Dragon Ball before the Z switch over. He's really cool. He's important to the history of the series. He still has a lot of cool superpowers. You could do all sorts of interesting things with it. I would hope he would have the Nyoibo. Anyway, Noiboy. Yeah, I'm saying it all wrong because I'm just
too... He's got his Noiboy.
You guys, Noiboy. I'm just too excited about the prospect of Goku hitting people with a red stick, okay?
He's really on that Kinta-un.
Kinta-un. Yeah, no, he'd have the Kintoan. He'd have his Nyoibo. There we go. And it would just be fun, And it would be really neat, and it would be a different kind of character. We know they can do short characters because their version of Kuririn is really good. So do more of that.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I think Kid Goku is one that everybody is asking for. I will add one more on there. I want a Raleigh from Dr. Slump.
Oh, that's who I forgot. I had her. Oh my God, it's on my notes, and Raleigh would have been really high up if I had remembered to put her on the final list. Shit.
Because she is in that little crossover bit in original Dragon Ball.
Yes.
And there is an episode in Dragon Ball Super where she comes back.
And even if she wasn't, she's the other, Toriyama protagonist of his career. We should have a Raleigh-chan in there, and that would be really fun. And, she's in J-Star's Victory Versus, and she's great in that game. So we know she can work in a fighting game. So, yes, a Raleigh-chan. Fuck it. Just shift everything. A Raleigh-chan is number 2, and then Kid Goku, and then everyone else is just... the Pilaf gang just fell off the list, but I think, I'd still like them.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would keep Mai on there for the Pilaf gang because she's the best one.
She is the best one. Well, she got quite a new character focus in the Future Trunks arc.
Exactly. Now she's super badass. She's just coming with a fucking shotgun. It would be rad.
That'd be great. She comes in against, Beerus, and she just fucking caps him in the head, and that's how she wins.
Yes.
All right. So good stuff. That is the stuff. Anything else before we move on to a little bit of news, Sean?
What's going on in the news, Jonathan?
Well, first off, you mentioned the Marvel Netflix shows earlier, kind of in passing, talking about Netflix. Right. There aren't going to be Marvel Netflix shows much longer, Sean, because Netflix is canceling all of them. The same week that they premiered Daredevil Season 3, which was this week, they canceled both Iron Fist and Luke Cage, both after 2 seasons. Iron Fist had been famously not well received, I think would be a nice way to say it. It was whatever the exact polar opposite of a critical darling is, that's what this was, critical punching bag. Nobody liked Iron Fist. I think even the people in Iron Fist didn't like Iron Fist. They looked like they wanted to get out of Iron Fist. And so Iron Fist getting canceled, not necessarily a huge surprise. Luke Cage getting canceled, to me, that season 2 was not particularly well received, but it's still, people liked season 1 a lot, I know. People obviously like the actor and the character, and Mike Coulter is really good, and it seems like a cool thing to be doing. I think once they've canceled Luke Cage, it's pretty clear they're done with the Marvel Netflix universe. I think there's a lot of speculation that Daredevil is not going to get renewed. They're clearly never doing the Defenders thing again because no one liked that show, and I don't think it did particularly well. Have they announced this 3rd season of Jessica Jones?
They have not announced it. Season 2 just aired not that long ago. It aired this year.
So I'm assuming they're just done with it. I think part of it is Disney is launching their own streaming network. That does not mean Disney will just be able to continue these shows. There are lots of legal restrictions that would stop them from doing that. But I do think it feels like Marvel or Netflix does not want to be in the Marvel business. I'm curious if outside of the initial seasons of Daredevil and Jessica Jones, any of these were doing particularly well, because I feel like I forgot there was a 2nd season of Luke Cage. I didn't hear a goddamn thing about it. Iron Fist, I only know there was a 2nd season because I heard critics making fun of it, I think they've been really off the radar. There's this 3rd season of Daredevil out right now where they fucking introduce, Bullseye and stuff like that, and I've barely heard a peep about it. I just don't think... They kind of represented the worst of the Netflix model excesses in a lot of ways. I don't think they built the kind of hype that Marvel likes out of these things. So it feels like this was a very expensive experiment that Netflix is probably done with.
Yeah, it's a big bummer to me because that 1st season of Daredevil is the best one. That is, out of all those shows, at least the ones I watched, that 1st season of Daredevil, and that, it wasn't a perfect season of television, but it was a pretty solid, interesting, different version of something like that. That felt like something I had not seen from superhero media in live action before.
It's got that episode
and so, like,
all about Matt's Catholicism and whether or not he's going to kill Kingpin that is still one of the best 60-minute stretches of the entire MCU.
Yeah. So there's like, there were those, while it kind of fell apart a little bit in the last couple of episodes, that first season of Daredevil had just some like killer fucking stuff in it. But yeah, like I felt like after that, you know, I watched Jessica Jones season 1 and I watched Luke Cage season 1, and Iron Fist being Iron Fist is probably what kept me from ever proceeding past that point. It's like the thing that like I think should keep everybody afraid of doing the like big shared universe thing is I feel like, you know, part of what happened with this Marvel Netflix stuff is if you have one pillar that does not stand up, the whole thing crumbles, is what it felt like.
It's what happened to me, too. It's the same way.
Yeah.
But you go on, sorry.
Yeah, because like with Jessica Jones and Luke Cage were both not quite as good. They didn't have quite the focus that the first season of Daredevil had, but they had such great leads, and particularly Jessica Jones had a fucking killer villain with David Tennant as the Purple Man, and then Luke Cage has like a little bit of a villain problem, but the villain for the first half of the season was really good. And again, like just like the main characters were fantastic and really captured the actors captured the quality of those characters from the comics and what I really like about them, and bringing them into this sort of like kind of slightly more grittier live action thing that Marvel was doing with Netflix. And so that part of it, even if, you know, the episodes were too long and there were too many episodes, and like Jessica Jones in particular felt like it was just like death by a thousand cuts with the fucking B plots on that one by the end. But like there still was enough of a nucleus around the good stuff in those series and the good main character that was like, okay, I'm still committed to this. And then fucking Iron Fist came out and it looked bad. The main dude just looked like the most boring fucking guy in the world. It just didn't seem like anything like an interesting take on this character, Danny Rand. And then it comes out and it gets critically, you know, just destroyed. And then like a series like that getting critically destroyed on top of knowing that it's going to have all the same problems that like the worst parts of Daredevil, Luke Cage, and Jessica Jones had, which is way too long, way too meandering bullshit of like that kind of like, you know, when the prestige TV format thing is done poorly, it is fucking unendurable to me at some point.
Oh yeah.
It's like there's only so much of that I can cash in. Like I can watch a bad anime forever because it doesn't kill me. When I have to watch the like navel gazing B plot bullshit of a badly done prestige TV show, it just kills your soul inside. And I just couldn't tolerate the idea of suffering through a really bad season of Iron Fist to watch Defenders. And so then when Defenders comes out, and also Defenders isn't like, it seems like people liked it more than Iron Fist season 1 but didn't love it. And I was like, well, I'm not going to watch Defenders without watching Iron Fist. And so if I'm not going to watch Defenders, then I'm not really going to watch Luke Cage season 2 or Jessica Jones season 2. I kind of want to watch The Punisher because a lot of people have said that they like that one, and that seems like it's disconnected enough. I maybe go back to that at some point, but it also just destroys me that I'm probably not going to watch Daredevil season 3, even though it looks like Vincent D'Onofrio is back in a big way as Wilson Fisk in that, and I really loved his version of that character. But I know that, you know, I've missed all this other shit that happened to the Defenders, and I just don't want to have to deal with that. And I'm much more comfortable saying, like, putting it aside and moving on. And it's just so disappointing because I remember being so invigorated and excited when Daredevil season 1 happened, and then you saw, like, the glimpses of what they were doing with the other characters, and then now it just feels so wasted.
It really is that problem where, I might go back. I might watch Daredevil season 3 because it looks reasonably interesting to me. I want to see like the Wilson Fisk stuff. I do like the Daredevil show, and this is probably its last season, so I'd kind of like to see how they wrap it up. I don't so much. I'll just read, you know, what happened in the Defenders, and I'll try to catch up. But it is this annoying thing where they made this trying to be a TV shared universe, and any kind of these shared universe things, a lot of the kinds of people they want watching this are completionists like us who want to watch all of it. So as you say, if one pillar is just utterly rotted from the bottom, the whole thing falls down. And the problem with this is they announced all of this stuff at once way back in like 2012 or something. It was in the afterglow of the original Joss Whedon Avengers making, you know, $2 billion or whatever it made. They signed this deal with Netflix, and it was this really big get for Netflix. This was back before Netflix had a bajillion original programs, and they didn't have an original programming identity, so this was like a really big get for them, and they said, and this was always their plan from the beginning, we're going to do these 4 characters, and then we're doing the Defenders. And I think it became pretty clear, well, the problem with that is, you have to make 4 separate TV shows. And all of those have to work as TV shows before you can make a shared universe TV show that will require you having watched 4 seasons of television, which 4 times 13, which is what, 52 episodes? Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's 52 hours of stuff. If you want to watch the Avengers movie, you have to watch about 8 hours of movies, right? You have to watch Iron Man, Hulk. Well, you don't have to watch the Hulk because they didn't do that. But you have to watch Iron Man, Thor, and Captain America. You have to watch 6 hours of movies, and then you go watch the Avengers. It's a very, very different thing. This, they were asking you to watch 52 hours of stuff before you sit down and watch the Defenders. Of course that was never going to work if they were all outstandingly good, you know? Because you're basically like... Because if you're treating this all as like one big TV show, so 52 episodes for the 4 shows, and then 8 episodes for the Defenders, that's 60 episodes. That's the run of most big prestige TV shows, and that's usually spread out over 5 or 6 years, not the 2 or 3 they did with this. Like, I think it was just a bad idea from a kind of business model standpoint, let alone any of these other concerns about quality. Quality is a big deal. I'm not trying to dismiss it. But, like, before you even get to the quality, I just don't even get it as a viewing model. Like, I think what this should have been is they should have started with Daredevil because they clearly had the best foundation for that. It's the series with the longest history, all of that stuff, right? And then maybe do, like, an anthology show, you know? Where maybe you have Luke Cage, Iron Fist, and Jessica Jones, if those are the 3 you want to do. Make a 13-episode season and have it, like, switch between them. And, like, Luke Cage gets 4 episodes, and Jessica Jones gets 4 episodes, and Iron Fist gets 4 episodes or something. And then maybe you can also just have them interact in each other's stories, because some of the best parts of Jessica Jones Season 1 was when Luke Cage was there. And then you could build that relationship, because that's really important in the comics. There's also the Luke Cage Iron Fist thing that's in the comics that never got translated into the TV show, really, because they couldn't have all the characters crossing over. That would have made way more sense, but they committed in contract with Marvel from the go. We're going to do 4 seasons, 13 episodes each, and then an 8-episode crossover. Before they knew if any of this stuff was going to work, of course it blew up in their face. You know?
Yeah.
It's insane. It's kind of like when we talked about the Telltale stuff over the last couple weeks. Like, of course it blew up in their face. You can't make, like, 7 seasons of episodic stuff in 1 year as a video game company and survive. It doesn't matter how well you're doing. I think it's the same with this. And I think it feels pretty obvious that Netflix would want to get this off their chest. You know, just like, it's weighing them down. They've got a lot of other stuff they're making. They don't need it. It's not part of their brand identity at this point. And I guess what disappoints me is just that these are really versions of these characters. I would love to see Marvel find a way to reclaim them and continue doing good work with these characters. I don't know if that's contractually possible after the Netflix stuff is done, because these were Netflix shows. Licensed by Marvel, but not, or licensed by Netflix from Marvel, but not made by Marvel and licensed to Netflix. It was not that way, it was the other way. So I don't know what's going to happen with all this.
Yeah. No, it is one of those issues with, like, I think the way that you structure these things on top of it, of, like, most of these shows felt like they were made for that binge model of Netflix, and so that was one of the things that really kept me from, and still keeps me from wanting to dive into something like Daredevil Season 3, is that if it's still that same structure, I'm afraid of, like, it's a lot harder for me where I am now compared to where I was in, like, 2013 or whenever Daredevil Season 1 aired, like 14, to like commit to, I'm gonna, like, watch this fucking, like, 13 hours of television, and in a way that, you know, you have to watch 2 or 3 episodes in a row, because generally one episode isn't that satisfying in and of itself. Yeah. It's one of the things I'm really enjoying about House on Haunted Hill right now, is that each episode, at least for the first 4 episodes, each episode is basically told from a different character's POV. So it has a nice, rounded, episodic kind of chapter feel to it. So I can watch one episode of on House of Haunted Hill, like, feel like I want to see what's going to happen next, but still come away satisfied. Which, other than for some select episodes of Daredevil Season 1, and there's like 1 or 2 maybe in Jessica Jones, I never had that feeling with those shows. And I felt I had to watch a bunch in the row. This
is the thing. There is exactly one show in television history that got away with not doing episodic, at least in some form or fashion, and being truly great, and that is The Wire. The Wire is the one show that did the TV as a long novel or movie or something and gets away with it, and it's because it is exceptionally, brilliantly great. Otherwise, the best TV shows, The Sopranos, Mad Men, Breaking Bad, any of them you want to cite, they are fundamentally still episodic. They are serialized, as in they tell an ongoing story, but individual episodes have stories within them. They have beginning, middle, and ends. They have some kind of, rising action, falling action. They are contained entities. You can push it more towards serialization, less towards serialization, but other than The Wire, I don't think there's a good example of the thing that these shows and a lot of other Netflix shows have done, which is we're just going to make a 10-hour movie. And it's just we're going to stop the storytelling at every hour and make you navigate to the next pane. That doesn't work. It is just there is, other than the one great TV show, there's no evidence for that thing working. And I think people really need to disabuse themselves with that notion, because it's not a way TV is or should ever work. And I think we're generally moving away from it. I think that's part of why these Marvel Netflix shows are getting canceled, is they kind of feel like relics, because I think the streaming TV age has started to come into its own with, what are the shows that are winning awards right now from streaming services? They're things like The Handmaid's Tale, which is serialized but episodic. The other one this year was Amazon's The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, which is fantastic. It's serialized but intensely episodic. It's from the creator of Gilmore Girls, Amy Sherman Palladino. Very much works like, one of her other shows where it has episodes with a focus, and that's what is successful. And I think Netflix is also trying, at least in some parts, to get away from that. Their shows like BoJack Horseman that are animated have always had more freedom, but I think for a long time they were forcing their creators to do 13-hour movies. And it seems like with things like The House on Haunted Hill that you're talking about, they're getting away from that a little bit, and that's good. It's healthy for TV.
Yeah.
All right. So let's move on to our next piece of news. This is about Red Dead Redemption 2, the game that is about to take over the internet for the next several months.
We have 1 week left before it drops,
yes.
and life ends.
And Rockstar company head, I guess, is he the narrative lead, Dan Houser?
Yes,
yeah.
I think that's his title.
Yeah, so Dan Houser, let's just say he stepped in it this week, Sean. Kicking off one of the crazier weeks of controversy I've seen for one video game studio, and it speaks to how heightened this whole situation with the game is. But Dan Houser, who does not give interviews much, no one from Rockstar gives interviews much. They gave a very rare interview to New York Magazine, and in that interview, Houser said that the team was working 100-hour weeks several times in 2018. This was mostly a puff piece, and New York Magazine did not push him on that. But the internet pushed him on that, because in the middle of a very rigorous conversation that is going on in the video game industry about work hours and crunch and whether or not employees of video game studios should be unionizing, this seemed ludicrously tone-deaf for him to, in context, essentially be bragging about how much overtime they were forcing people to work. Now, Rockstar and Dan Houser later responded by issuing a clarifying quote, claiming Houser was only talking about their senior leadership, although it also included a part of a clarifying comment that really irked me, where he said, "No one senior or junior is ever forced to work hard," which is not the issue, Dan Houser. The issue is how much you make them work hard, but whatever. Subsequently, Rockstar announced that they were now allowing employees to post about their experiences on social media, and some employees did do that. Surprisingly, no employees risked their employment by saying, "Yes, it's horrible here, please let me out." They also told their QA studio, Rockstar Lincoln, which is a London-based studio, that overtime is now optional. The structure at the studio up to now had been overtime was technically optional, but was essentially enforced in a way that made it mandatory. So they are trying to take some action here, but it has really only amplified the conversation about working conditions in the industry. And I should also note that the video game industry's most prominent investigative journalist, Jason Schreier, has been tweeting all week that he is working on a very in-depth investigative story about Rockstar's working conditions, because no one has dug into that too intensely until the last time this flared up, which was around the release of Red Dead Redemption 1, when a group of spouses of Rockstar employees wrote about this issue and about horrible crunch. And so there is more coming. It feels like the more we hear, the worse the situation seems to be. But yes, this is the controversy that is swirling around Red Dead Redemption 2 as it gallops into stores next week.
Yeah, it's one of those things that when that original interview broke, it reads like Dan Houser thought it was still 2010.
Yes.
And it was like, it's one of those things that it's kind of like weirdly reassuring every now and then where you see something like that, you're like, oh god, like there has been so much change and progress in the games industry because you sound like a fucking dinosaur when you said that, of like trying to be braggy about how many hours you're working on this game a week. It's like 100 hours a week is fucking, that's like such an absurd number. 100 hours a week. It's like, I can't even really comprehend that. That's like, that's, if you factor in shit like sleeping and eating and commuting, it leaves you something like an hour a day for the 7 days for like the whole 7-day week that is not working or doing something that is like necessary for pure survival.
Yeah.
You know, and it's just like, that's 100-hour work week is just an utterly absurd notion at all.
I think when we, hear horrible reports out of like Foxconn in China or something about working conditions, it's not even 100-hour week, right? It's probably like 80 or something. And that's a horrible human rights abuse. And we all treat it like that because it is. And it should be treated like that. 100-hour, if you're making your employees work 100 hours a week, that's a fucking human rights abuse. I'm sorry. It's just like, that's what we would treat it as if we heard about this in a like foreign country that we outsource work to, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like, there's a whole fucking story arc in Persona 5 that is basically about this. You know, we need somebody to go to Danhauser's mind and steal his distorted desire or Yukubo or whatever. And one of the things that is interesting, and it's like, it's so nice to see, I feel like, a lot of people, both in like the gaming press and then like in the gaming community, being a lot more responsive to these issues than we have been in the past, and pointing out shit like the shit that Dan Houser and other, senior people at Rockstar should know, which is that it's like, how crunch work is not typically that like you are going in and enforcing and like putting like a mandate down on someone's desk that's like, you're going to work 100 hours this week or we're firing you. That's not how that fucking works, because that's insane. Like, that's a whole other kind of level of insanity. How it works is it's just a normal kind of soft coercion. It's basically peer pressure, that if you have anybody working those kinds of hours, then everybody feels like they are compelled to work those kinds of hours. And like you said, it's also that kind of thing of, you can say and tell people like, oh, you can put out your experiences on Twitter and there will be no reprimanding for it or anything like that. But of course, like, people understand implicitly this, like, it would not be good for your relationships at the studio if you're an employee of Rockstar and you go out and have a huge Twitter rant about, how working that 100-hour week ruined your relationship with your spouse and your personal health and hygiene and all that kind of stuff that stuff actually does to people. You can't do that because it's going to destroy your relationship with your bosses and your coworkers. And so it's a whole community that exists in any business, at any office, whether it's game developers or anything else. And you have to be mindful of like the social dynamics of that group and that community. And that is what is creating crunch. Like, the way you fight crunch is by saying everybody like comes in at like 8 or 9 and leaves at 5. And if like you aren't leaving at 5 or whatever our closing hours are, there's like a real good specific special reason for why that's the case. That is a like big exception to the rule. Not like everybody is always staying until like 8 o'clock and then going home at like the last possible moment.
Yeah, and near the end of a project, we could negotiate. We could say, you know what, we all want to work more. Maybe we work till 6, maybe we work till 7. But you have some like community conversation and rules about it, not just peer pressure, right? And this is, I've worked in an office. I worked in an office situation, and won't name the company or anything, but there was definitely a culture of, I think, overwork in some cases. And this was a full-time job. It's a salaried position. It's not technically hourly, but I'm supposed to be there 40 hours a week. They cannot technically force me to work more than that, but there were times of the year where we had a lot going on, and I think it could sometimes be a very unhealthy culture of overwork. And, my recourse was not, I couldn't tell people to shove it, I couldn't say like, no, you know what, we have too many things on our plate, we can't finish it, I'm going to go home at 5:30, fuck all you guys, and I'll come back tomorrow. I wouldn't say the fuck all you guys part. Like, again, they could not legally fire me for that, but it would be very, very awkward if I came in the next day and everyone else had been working late because we had something going on and I didn't, right? And the answer to that is not necessarily any individual person's problem. It was, I think, a cultural issue we had about time management and overwork and things like that, And again, to get along with people and to feel like you're being part of the team, sometimes you would work longer hours. Now, this was not a systemic issue like it is with this. All I'm saying is that, I don't feel like I was abused or anything. All I'm saying is that I really do understand how, as you scale that up beyond the kind of work I was doing to actively creative work like a video game industry, to creative work that is highly technically engaged, that is on really tight deadlines and has hundreds of millions of dollars going in, it's very easy for me to imagine how a really poisonous culture of crunch becomes very real. Like if this is abstracted for you, I understand that. Not everyone works in situations where this would feel like an immediate thing that might happen. But, it does not feel abstracted to me, and it's an idea that terrifies me. And again, the fact that Dan Houser just didn't get the idea, you didn't get the fucking memo that in 2018 you shouldn't be bragging about 100-hour crunch weeks. My fear about Red Dead Redemption 2 is that I think Rockstar's games age more poorly than just about any other game studio on the market. Like Grand Theft Auto 4 feels like an absolute goddamn dinosaur at this point, and that game is only 10 years old this year. Red Dead Redemption 1 is unplayable in the year 2018. If you go back to it now, it's on Xbox One backwards compatibility. It's just unplayable at this point. Grand Theft Auto 5 felt very dated the moment it came out in 2013. And, I feel like they've been stuck in the early 2000s for most of their games for a while. Red Dead Redemption 1 felt a little less stuck in that, but I think you look at it now and it feels more stuck in that. And I hope the game feels like it's a game for 2018 and not a game for 2007. And maybe it will be, maybe it won't be. I don't know. The people making it are talking like they're making a game in 2007, and that worries me in a lot of different ways.
Yeah. One of the other things that I hope sustains from this is I really hope, I'm really excited to see Jason Schreier's article and see some of the fallout from this. But I hope that people understand more broadly that when this 100-hour work week thing and this kind of crunch with Rockstar, I hope it doesn't stop here at this controversy, which is sometimes I feel like this happens where it's this example of something that is this big endemic issue, an entire sector, an entire business, an entire community. This one example comes out and everybody is scandalized by it, and then kind of goes back to business as normal and maybe punishes Rockstar for it, and Rockstar gets condemned for it. But then people don't understand that almost every AAA studio does this. You sure as shit know that, people are crunching hard on fucking Destiny, whatever, at Bungie. People are crunching hard on Assassin's Creed 37 at whichever, Ubisoft studio is making that.
Ubisoft Antarctica. They're making those Gen 2 penguins work very hard to make the latest Assassin's Creed game sent in.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and all the people at Treyarch were crunching real hard to have fucking Black Ops 4 just come out earlier this year. It is such a basic endemic issue in the industry. It has been for as long as we've been alive. Again, my earliest memories of anything about behind the scenes, understanding how video games were made, were the Halo 2 documentaries on the Halo 2 limited edition thing that were all about the horrible culture of crunch at Bungie in 2001 to 2004 when they're making Halo 2, and then them talking about stories from them making Halo 1, which had that fucking crunch bullshit. It's this has been going on for 20 plus years at this point in video games, and it's I sometimes get concerned when these kinds of stories get out that people sort of pile onto this and then ignore the fact that it's not just Rockstar. If a bunch of video game reviewers, and they should do this, come out and say and put into the Red Dead Redemption 2 reviews and start criticizing some of the labor practices, I think you should do that. But also maybe you should look at yourself and see, did you put anything like that in the Assassin's Creed Odyssey review? Are you going to put that into the next review of a big AAA game like Days Gone or whatever the fuck's the next one that's going to come out? Or Smash Brothers or any of those. If we want the change to happen and we want people like us and people like the games community and then games media to try to affect this change, it can't just be Red Dead Redemption 2 and it can't just be Rockstar. And I really hope that there's more effort to push that forward, because that's the only way that any of this stuff gets changed. That's the only way that people unionize. That's the only way you change any of this, is by putting a constant focused pressure, not just this one little dot.
Look, the first step to solving a problem is admitting you have the problem. And I think, the thing about Halo 2 is you talk about, like, because I remember that too, watching those videos. And the thing is, back in 2004, I don't think we were aware as, like, a society, as an industry that, oh, this isn't just part of how video games are made. This is a problem that we have. Like, we could probably make video games and not do this to ourselves, I don't make video games, but I mean, the industry could say that. And for a long time, that was the view. And when we say what Dan Houser said feels like it's out of a different decade, that's what I mean, is that we're getting to a point where we're acknowledging the problem. Now, I will feel better about where we are when a person like Dan Houser gives that interview and says, I think we did a good job managing our team's time and lives this time, and I think we could do an even better job at that next time. That's what I want to hear. I want to hear these people saying, there is a problem, we're working to solve it, here are our steps. That's the thing we're still not hearing, I think, from within the industry much, and that's what we need to hear. And when we get to that point, I will feel better about it. That's when you could, feel like we don't have to sound the alarm 7 days a week.
Yeah.
But we're not there yet. And anyway, getting back from the industry just to Red Dead Redemption 2, though, I'm curious what your thoughts are going into the game next week and where we are with it. I will say, I said on the podcast last week that I was already exhausted with the game and it wasn't even out yet. I feel really vindicated by that statement this week because I'm really fucking exhausted with Red Dead Redemption 2 and I haven't even seen the game yet.
Yeah. So putting, potential human rights abuses aside for a second, which you don't know that's what human people should do, but it's what we do all the time. I'm actually pretty excited for Red Dead Redemption 2. Because I was, after, a lot of the trailers that has been going for, 2 years or whatever, how long they've been showing trailers for this game, both of us, we have, bunches of conversations on the podcast of being very sort of, apathetic about it, and feeling I don't know, GTA 5 has a lot of things that are interesting about it, but as you said, that game does not age well fucking at all, and was dated in a lot of ways when it came out. But the more information I've learned about Red Dead Redemption 2, the more previews that have come out, because there's that whole, a couple weeks ago, there was a whole big preview cycle where everybody working at major game sites got to play 2 hours or something of Red Dead Redemption 2, and hearing different people talk about it, particularly there was an episode of the Waypoint Radio where Austin Walker at Waypoint got to play it, and he talked a lot about that experience, and him relating the sort of dynamic open world stuff he engaged with, and sort of relating different things about the game to stuff like Fable or Far Cry 2 as analogies for different game systems that they're trying to put into the game. It seems really interesting to me. It seems like they're trying to do something different within the open world genre in a way that Rockstar has not tried to do since GTA 3, maybe. Red Dead Redemption 2 tried a little bit of different stuff with the Strangers and Freaks, but didn't just stray too far afield. Red Dead Redemption 2, if it is what the previews are kind of indicating, maybe there's a lot more here, and them really being far more experimental as a studio than Rockstar has been in a very long time. And if that is the case, I'm pretty excited to see what that is and what it is like when I'm playing it. I'm not necessarily super stoked about whatever the main story is going to be, because they have definitely not sold me on that part. But I really want to just sort of ride around in that world, explore the different edges, and just sort of see this big creation that they've made, and the different sort of ideas of how to explore it that they put into the game that sound different from what we've been playing for decades at this point. It feels like. Yeah.
I agree to a point. I'm curious about what they've done from a gameplay level. It does sound interesting. There's been a lot that has perked my ears up a little bit, I do, I watched the launch trailer they put out the other day, and I guess what is weighing me down at this point is just every bit of story narrative stuff I see out of this, the performances and the character animation and the dialogue and the writing, feels like the most stock Rockstar bad, edgy criminal men are edgy criminals. Oh my god, we're really deep because it's 2003 and games haven't had in-depth stories with voice acting much yet, and I don't know. I'm not 16 years old anymore.
Right.
I look at some of the trailers and I just feel like I'm too old for this shit. And I feel that in my heart. I feel like I'm fucking Murtaugh in Lethal Weapon looking at the world and I'm being I'm too old for this shit. So I don't know. I will say, if I did not host a podcast, I would not be buying this game. I would wait and I would hear some reviews and I would hear what, my friend Sean, who in this scenario I think would probably also not have a podcast, who had to say about it. And then I might decide, Jonathan, the podcast host, feels like he needs to play it for like due diligence and professional reasons. So I'll see. I'll probably pick it up. I don't know. I'm in a weird place with this one, especially because there's just so much else out this year. There's only like 2 weeks between this and Hitman 2, and then there's 1 week between Hitman 2 and Fallout and Pokemon, and then there's only 3 weeks between that and Smash Bros. And all that other stuff. So there's a lot in here. I'm definitely very curious. We shall see. I will probably play some of it because it's coming out on a Friday, so we would probably do our podcast Sunday night, and we would be able to give first impressions and get them sweet clicks because, we'd get to put Red Dead Redemption 2 in the title of our podcast, and we would get a lot of impressions on that. So, we'll see. I don't know. I feel like, do you think a lot of people are in the same boat in that way of, like, not knowing how to feel, or is it just mostly people are just excited?
No. It's because there are a lot of people who are 16 years old.
Yeah.
you know, like, because it is that thing where it's like, because I think we both are feeling like the same kind of like Rockstar fatigue that we've been around the block with this kind of shit. And the only reason why I'm excited for Red Dead Redemption 2 at all is that stuff around the edges of like the weird conversation system and the camp and like the different elements of the game that sounds like is trying to push against you in different ways, like having to clean your gun and bathe and do that kind of stuff. Different ideas that they've tried in games like San Andreas that they kind of abandoned that I'm interested to see them bring back. That's the stuff I'm interested in. But it does feel like, I think there's always going to be that like 16-year-old that just watched The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly for the first time and whose mind is blown and was way too young to play Red Dead Redemption 1 when it came out because they would have been like 9 or something. And so they are like here for Red Dead Redemption 2. And it's going to be like the most gorgeous, fucking like technically impressive game that's been made up to this point. Like it's guaranteed to have all that Rockstar like spit and polish, like that is the one thing about GTA 5 I am still continuously impressed by that has not aged is the presentation of that game and the way that game looks. Like that and the open world they made is still incredibly impressive like 5+ years on. So that element of it, that's always going to be sexy to somebody.
Yeah. No, I'm very curious. I think it's fascinating that we're finally getting our first 2 Blu-ray video game. It's not happened before.
Right. Yeah.
And yeah, that's going to be interesting to me. We're finally over the point where a video game, its regular release is just 100 gigabytes. And I feel like in some ways we should all just pack it up at that point. We're too big. I'm sorry. Let's all pack it in. Let's all just go play some JRPGs that download in like 10 gigabyte patches. We're fine. Maybe we don't need the 100 gigabyte video games, but yeah, we shall see. When video games are a 10th of your monthly data cap, I don't know what we're doing anymore, but we will find out. That will be for next week. For now, you want to talk about Doctor Who?
Let's talk about the Doctor Who, Jonathan.
God, we're not going to get an up note on this podcast because this Doctor Who depressed me, Sean.
Yeah, I think I probably am a little bit more positive on it than you are, but like I feel conflicted about this episode of Doctor Who, which I guess is like, I feel like that's what I've said about all of the 3 of these episodes. So I don't know. Maybe it will be the same conversation.
All right. So we are talking about episode 3 of Doctor Who Series 11, Rosa. This was today's episode. It is about the Doctor and friends going back in time to Montgomery, Alabama, 1955, and having an adventure, sort of, with Rosa Parks. Yeah, so here's my thoughts. There will be spoilers for this segment, so if you haven't seen it, I don't know what you're doing here anyway. You know how Doctor Who works on this show. We love it. We talk about it. Here's my thoughts on this week's episode, Sean.
Okay.
I actually think as an episode of Doctor Who, all real-world import and impact aside, I think this is the most solid script of the 3 so far this year. I think it is the most solidly paced. I think it has the best character writing in general. I think it uses the ensemble in the most balanced and effective way. Like, I still could not tell you much about Yasmin, but I do think she got to come across much more strongly as a character in this one. I think there were interesting character dynamics at play. I think Graham had a lot of strong moments. The Doctor got the best joke of the season so far, which was the Banksy thing. Jodie Whittaker absolutely fucking slayed that joke, and I laughed very hard. I think it had the best visual palette and sense of editing. There was only one bad cut in this one to me. other than like the 50 bad cuts last week. So all of that was more solid. But this is easily the hardest I've ever cringed at an episode of Doctor Who. Because I know there are older episodes from like the 60s and 70s where you will cringe for different reasons, but I would also say you have a historical mindset where this was made in the 60s and 70s. This is 2018, and for some reason, Chris Chibnall and company did not understand that taking one of the most seminal human actions of American history by a black American and depicting it through a story led by a white time-traveling alien in a silly police box so that the real narrative accomplishments are entirely hers and not Rosa Parks is really fucking problematic. It's ludicrously problematic. And the entire last 20 minutes, the fucking climax of this episode, which is the Doctor and company rushing around the streets of Montgomery, trying to make sure that something really racist happens to Rosa Parks so she is able to protest that racism, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. It is so ludicrously incompetent. It is historically illiterate. This is not how the fucking Montgomery bus boycotts worked as a larger thing. Like, even if the crazy, evil, racist time traveler dude got his goal and Rosa Parks did not sit on the bus that one day, like, Rosa Parks is really important. This episode is also robbing the entire, like, the NAACP and the Southern Christian Leadership Conference and, like, all these other organizations that went into doing this thing. This was not just, like, one bad thing happened to Rosa Parks and it all, came out of nowhere. There was a concerted effort to try to figure out what are we going to do about the bus boycotts, and this is the thing that happened. So again, the episode is just historically illiterate on that level. It is, I think, some of the most egregious stuff Doctor Who has ever done of not knowing how to write or depict Americans. Like, the actress who plays Rosa Parks, Vinette Robinson, she's fine, but boy is it easy to tell she's British and doing a really bad Southern accent, as I also noticed with the guy playing Martin Luther King Jr. Every scene of a racist white person in this episode is the archest, stupidest way they could have written the scene. I think this episode's reprehensible, almost to me, in some of, like, how tone-deaf it is, because it is really fucking tone-deaf.
Yeah, I don't know if I feel as strongly on that, because I think the episode has a lot of problems in almost no matter what it does. Like, the only way you could make this episode and have it be good is if you made it a, like, classic style First Doctor, like, true historical. Like, yes. This was your chance, like, this was the fucking target you set up, and the only way to hit the bullseye was to not have any aliens, not have any time-traveling bullshit, not have, like, an antagonist in the traditional way, which is something that Stephen Moffat did, like, put some pains into, I feel like, setting up in the past couple of seasons, like season 9 and 10, experimenting with episodes like Heaven Sent, Hellbent, Twice Upon a Time, that have no real antagonist, that all the drama and all the conflict is internal and is not about the Doctor fighting something or about an alien trying to take something over. And so it's like, I think they've, like, proved that you can do it just fine. I mean, obviously you could do it, but, like, Doctor Who just never really kind of, like, in the modern era, ventured outside these sort of very narrow confines of plot structures that had been tried and true since RTD was writing stuff. And this was their opportunity to try to make something that was more a true historical, did not have to operate on this, like, very sort of, like, cliche, basic, like, antagonist and conflict embodied in this, like, external protagonist or antagonist, and have everything be the conflict of, like, the drama between the characters and the drama in the time period that you're set in, and just have it be a historical drama that happens to have Doctor Who in it. And that's how the old, like, Marco Polo, the Aztecs, which we did a whole bonus episode on, that's how those episodes worked, and they did it really fucking well. That's what this episode needed to do, because there are moments where it feels like this episode kind of gets it, and they do make an effort to show that Rosa Parks, like, her whole life was not just, I sit on this bus and then do not move for, like, these white people, and then that's her whole life, and that's all she contributed, and that's what changed everything. Like, they make efforts to show that she is engaged in real civil rights activism, like this is a whole life that she's leading and a whole fight that she is a part of, and they try to get into that a little bit, but they just don't have the time and the nuance to be able to really engage with that aspect of the story, and so they end up, like, doing this weird dance of like trying to put nuance in it, but then also trying to have just ridiculous time traveling racist guy that has no real explanation, no backstory. I'd really love to know why, like 20,000 years or something into the future, there's some dude that's still fixated on fucking Alabama 1955. Like, that would be like us time traveling back to like ancient Egypt and being really upset about some like cultural dispute back then and trying to change it.
Because
it's so distant temporally, it makes no sense.
When I talk about historical illiteracy, this also relies on positing the assumption that racism was solved as a direct extension of what Rosa Parks did. You have to, and I know the episode pays lip service with the Ryan and Yaz conversations about how the future isn't perfect, but the thing the episode keeps coming back to is that, like, yeah, things are okay now, and racism is a fringe thing. That's our present. I was like, no, we could very well be back to as bad as it was with just a couple more terrible, societal choices. Like, you are not taking a long arc view of history here, Doctor Who, and I don't know, as a show about a person who travels through all of time and space, maybe you should think about a long arc view of history where things are a little more complicated than you're making them out to be.
Yeah, and it's like, honestly, maybe we're getting hit ourselves with this conversation, but I feel like one thing I was really hoping for at the end of this episode was for the time-traveling racist to win, in the sense of, like, Rosa Parks, like, the situation doesn't happen perfectly, and, like, what we understand of history of, like, that exact scenario didn't happen, but nothing significant changed because of that, because if that moment was not a flashpoint that became iconic in history, another moment would have been, like, it's because it's part of a whole fight. It's a whole, it's not just this one moment. And it's like the fixation on this one moment, I think, distracts so much. And it's why having this like external threat that's trying to change history, also in a way that feels like really, we shouldn't get too hung up on like consistency in Doctor Who, but it's so inconsistent with how Doctor Who has ever just like played with history or showed time travel. I don't know why history is all of a sudden so fucking fragile in this episode. But like, if you focus on that stuff, it is one of the things that robs the real nuance that it feels like areas of this episode wants to engage in, with the nature of like the civil rights movement and who Rosa Parks was in the fight that they were engaged in, and that we are still engaged in now and we will be engaged in for the foreseeable future. It sort of is not able to dig into any of that stuff. And then on the other side, it also has this issue of like, there are some moments like that Ryan Yaz conversation is a good example. The ending of the episode is a good example, where it feels so PSA-y. It feels so like all of a sudden these characters like talking to me out of like a Wikipedia article about Rosa Parks or about like racism or something, and it doesn't feel like a personal lived experience. Like, it feels like the characters in certain sections are talking to the audience and not talking to each other and not being characters, and that like is bad on the other end of like, it's trying to be like good about like, serving history, but doing so in a way that like robs any sort of like the story or the characters of any power or weight or personality, and makes the whole thing feel clunky and awkward and like really blunt.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's the other biggest problem of this episode is Rosa Parks is given zero interiority in this episode. She is not a character. She's a person on screen for other people to talk about. Rosa Parks is here so the Doctor, a white woman, can tell us about why Rosa Parks is important. And, again, I shouldn't need to get out the fucking diagrams to show you why that's wrong, Chris Chibnall and company. Like, this isn't hard. This should not be hard in 2018 to figure out that if you're going to do a Rosa Parks episode of time travel, it should not be about other people, again, led by white characters, going around and telling people why Rosa Parks is important. There is no effort to try to show what about Rosa's life made this extraordinary. What about this moment made it extraordinary? There's a lot of effort to, again, cut and paste things out of her Wikipedia article to tell us why it is important, but that's as far as this episode goes. And again, then you have the whole climax where they historically recreate the situation, and we're going to have to get back to that because I still can't quite believe I saw that in an episode of Doctor Who. That is so monumentally stupid. I can't even believe they did that. Maybe I take back what I said about this being the best script so far. It's so stupid. I don't know. I feel like this is a tangled web of an episode. I liked the first half of it more than the second half of it before, again, they reveal the villain's full plot. There are some good moments. I think Jodie Whittaker continues to be great, and her moments where she's like standing off against the villain, she's very good in those scenes. I like all the other characters in this one. I think the Yaz and Ryan conversation in the alleyway is not particularly well written, but I liked that Doctor Who is at a point where you can have two characters of color and have them on their own in the episode and can have that heart-to-heart. I wish the heart-to-heart was better. I think that was still a significant little moment in the history of Doctor Who to just have two characters bluntly talk about how they experience racism in their lives, but at the same time, it feels like a missed opportunity. Because that's what this episode needed to be if you're going to do Rosa Parks in this context is... Again, do it as a pure historical as you're saying, and then it would not be at all to me about the Doctor and friends interfering in the events of the American Civil Rights Movement, because they have absolutely no right to do that. And the narrative has absolutely no right to do that. But what they could do is they could be affected by it and they could think about it. And you could have the characters talking about how racism has affected them. You could hear from Ryan. You could hear from Yaz. You could hear Graham's perspective as an older white man who married into a black family. You could have that heart-to-heart. And then maybe this would also be time to mention the elephant in the room of the Doctor being a woman, which I don't think the show necessarily needs to do. I like how they've handled it in that she is such a natural fit for the role. The Doctor probably wouldn't think about it that much, so we just steam ahead. But if you're having that conversation, then it is probably time to bring that in. Again, I'm not saying it's a failing that this episode doesn't necessarily do all of those things, but if you were going to do the meaningful episode about racism, that's what you do, and I think they tend to take the easy route on every single one of those issues in this episode when there is a harder but more rewarding path in front of them. And that disappoints me because that's not Doctor Who to me. I don't think Doctor Who at his best takes the easy ways out.
Yeah, I agree. But it is a little bit in line with, the subject matter is more sensitive, but it is a lot like how a lot of the historicals have been done in New Who, and it's like the main difference is that this one is a lot darker and more serious and has more of an edge to it than like the Shakespeare one with David Tennant or like any of the fucking RTD ones, which are very goofy but also like have a lot of the same problems of you feel like you don't really get any sense of the history that's going on. You don't you're so fixated on some ridiculous fucking alien something that's happening that you don't get to... It feels like it's just a waste to even like have an episode set in this time period if you're not really going to do the episode in the time period and you're going to be focused on time travel, alien bullshit the whole time.
But when you're doing the William Shakespeare episode, you're not opening up the can of worms that you're opening with this one. Like, I agree the Shakespeare episode is pretty forgettable and a little disappointing. It's utterly harmless. There's nothing actively bad about what that episode is like putting out into the world. It's like, okay, they had an adventure with Shakespeare. It could have been better. It was fine. David Tennant was fun. Let's move on. You literally cannot do that with Rosa Parks. You just literally cannot treat it with the kid gloves that they treat all the other historical figures in modern Doctor Who. I agree. They took the RTD format, like they dusted off the Mad Libs script for RTD era historical figures that they had sitting in the Doctor Who production office, and they filled it in with Rosa Parks stuff, and I don't think they really went much further with that, and that's very problematic. It's kind of the thing we were afraid of last week when we saw, oh God, they're doing this, but they're doing it with someone like first much more recent. When you're doing William Shakespeare, you're going like 600 years into the past, to a guy we don't actually know much about. That's fine. There's a reason why nobody gets in a tizzy if Doctor Who has like historical details out of like order with William Shakespeare. Who gives a fuck, right? With William Shakespeare. With Rosa Parks, she died not that long ago. There are people alive who knew her. People would give a fuck if you got it wrong here. And I don't think it does not feel to me like a lot of effort was made to really make this different, given how different the subject matter is from the normal subject matter of a Doctor Who modern historical episode.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So, I mean, what else do you want to talk about here? Because we're talking kind of in broad strokes. Are there any specific scenes? Some of this just in the Chris Chibnall fashion so far, like the villain is just so bland and vague. I don't think it's even worth talking about because I don't know what there is to say. There's literally no substance there.
Yeah, like I'm so fascinated in a weird way by this villain because of how nothing he is, but like I feel like you can sometimes in Doctor Who you can get away with a very nothing villain if it's just like some weird alien dude. You know, like Tim Shaw in the first episode of this season. Like not great antagonist, but like I kind of don't give a shit about him. And if they weren't trying to make the Stinza or whatever seemingly a thing in this season based on what happened last episode, I would totally forget about Tim Shaw and it would never bother me because he's just a random alien dude. But this is just the villain in this episode is just a guy. Like, he's just a fucking guy from the future who came back in time because he's so obsessed with, like, 21st century race relations that he came back from what I presume is supposed to be the 52nd century, which is when all the other time travel... That's when, like, Jack Harkness is from. That's, like, Talons of Wang Chiang. That's, like, generally when humans have time travel technology. That's when they're from. And it's just, like, the concept to me of somebody being like tens of thousands of years in the future going back to now and trying to change history based around Rosa Parks is like, again, so weird because I feel like it's a fundamental misunderstanding of what like racism and bigotry is in that like if humanity exists tens of thousands of years from now, we're going to be fucking prejudiced bigot motherfuckers for sure. I'm enough of a cynical guy. I do not think Star Trek like Utopia is ever going to happen. It's in human nature in some ways to have those elements to us, but it's not going to be based around skin color. Like it just can't be. Like it just can't. At that point, human history will have gone on for way too long. It just doesn't make sense for racism to be based around the same parameters that it has been for the past 200 to 300 years, because it's like historically most like bigotry and most prejudice and that has not been based on skin color. It has not been based on that. Like it's based on other factors. It's based on religion. It's based on culture. It's based on language. It's based on whatever. It's not typically just based on skin color. And so it's like a weird concept to me that this fucking 52nd century time traveler comes back to this moment in time to change what? Like how? Like it's like such a like huge gap in time that it feels very weird to me. That's like this is what this dude's thing is. Like how would it not be something more recent based on something that would whatever like his time would have?
Every Chris Chibnall episode feels like he wrote it, and whenever the villain showed up, he would put in brackets insert villain/villainous plot here, and then left that for later to figure it out. And that's not how you write anything. But it's how every Chris Chibnall episode feels like it's written, is we'll insert the villain later. We're going to make it as vague and non-committal of a thing as possible, because this episode doesn't even try to get into the villain's, like, backstory or why he would feel these things or try to, like, deal with any of the things you're talking about there, you know? It's just, it doesn't, there is the brief moment where the doctor, or I think it's when Ryan is squaring off with him, and he, like, intimates his full racism, but then he gets zapped away to the past, which also feels like maybe there should have been a conversation about that. That does not feel like something the doctor would just kind of, like, be like, what did you do, Ryan? What? Like, that's not, what? You know, but no, that just happened. That was weird. I don't know. I mean, maybe we'll have this conversation later. I feel like it's maybe time to sound the bell on, is Chris Chibnall fit to write Doctor Who? Because these 3 episodes are messy. Like, the fundamentals, like, he can write for the Doctor, although increasingly he can write for the Doctor in one mode, and we're not seeing any more depth beyond that. He can write good companion dialogue, but again, we have not really done anything with them as characters outside of the first episode. I don't know. It's only 3 episodes. I don't want to be too judgmental this early on, but I will also say the next 2 are also Chris Chibnall solo episodes. We're not getting another, like, this one was also written by a woman named Mallory Blackman, co-wrote with Chris Chibnall, but we're not getting another episode by a different writer until episode 6. So this first half of the season is all Chris Chibnall, and when I saw that, I just kind of groaned, because I so want to see someone else write at this point, because he's written, I think, 7 or 8 stories, and there's no evidence of him being a particularly good Doctor Who writer, let alone a good enough one to run the show, which, like, you know, we've talked about over the years that we have issues with some of Russell T. Davies' scripts. I would never in a million years say Russell T. Davies is anything less than a very good Doctor Who writer.
Oh, God. Like, he wrote Midnight, like, Midnight's one of the best episodes of modern Doctor Who, and that's like his best. But there are lots of really great. I mean, he wrote Rose. Rose is a terrific episode.
He's got lots of, even in his non-terrific ones, he generally just has a viewpoint that is very different than other writers. He has a sense of structure that is really strong. Like, it's easy to criticize Russell T Davies because he's got the fundamentals generally down pat, and then you're criticizing on top of that. With Chris Chibnall, we're not even past that point because the fundamentals aren't there. And when the fundamentals aren't there, it's hard. We're not even. This is why our conversations, like, I feel like we're grasping at straws to even know what to talk about because there's kind of no meat on the bones right now.
Yeah, because we're faced with another story that like doesn't have that much of a story. Like, it has at least like through like sheer force of necessity, it is at least about racism. So it's like it is like. There is at least some sort of content to the plot in a way that there has not been for the past 2 episodes. Again, but not because of any sort of like excellence in script writing or anything. It is because they picked a setting in which it is virtually impossible not to have some sort of like vaguely thematic content to the plotting. But it fails to make any sort of specific statement about anything that's interesting. It doesn't like really explore the concept of racism or, racism now, racism in the future, racism in 1950s Alabama. Like it's just sort of like this vague pastiche of like racism, and then the episode's over. And part of that is that like when you do choose to have like an external antagonist, you then have like a lot of responsibilities in the plot to like have that external antagonist to mean something, to stand for something, to represent generally the opposite of whatever it is you are like trying to communicate is valuable or desirable in the society or in people. And they just, again, like, this guy is the most nothing, like, hey guys, I showed up, I'm racist from the future, I've got some weird fucking shit of like, he just knows what a TARDIS is and sees the TARDIS and like goes, and when that first conversation with the Doctor just says like, oh, that police box, that's your TARDIS, isn't it? I'm like, how the fuck do you know that?
That is
like,
9 times.
What?
Like, every other time in the history of Doctor Who when that has happened, it's for like an extraordinary reason, and like a big red alarm goes off in the Doctor's head of like, how does anyone know what my TARDIS is?
Yeah, it's like, I'm like, is this dude the Master? Is he like one of those weird Dalek slaves from like Asylum of the Daleks? Like, what the fuck? How do you know what a TARDIS is? It's particularly weird because this is like the one episode out of these 3 that actually went to some pains to make explicit like references to things from modern Doctor Who. We get the vortex manipulator, which is something specific from modern Doctor Who. We get what's some of the other shit? We get the perception filter gets name dropped. That's like a concept that has been used a bunch in the RTD years, and then Moffat used it a couple times, like in the 11th Hour. So
we get the space
like,
prison that I think is a Moffat thing.
Yes, that's Storm Cage, and that's where River is from. In season 6, and so that's where she goes after she quote unquote kills the Doctor or whatever. So yeah, there's like a bunch of little tiny references to things that like, I was pretty actually happy to see that. I thought it was cool that we're making some explicit connections and kind of smoothing over some of the big changes that have happened. I liked that. But it's weird to have all of those connections, and some of which, like the Stormcase thing, are a little bit obscure and not something you really expect to be brought up again. And then you make what feels like is a weird, like, continuity gaffe or something, and have this character reference the TARDIS when this character should have no real means, from what we understand of the past 10 years of Doctor Who, should have no idea what the fuck a TARDIS is, and should not be able to identify it based on the police box. It's such a weird moment, and it's one of like a number of things about this weird time traveling racist from the future that just doesn't make sense and is not explained, and feels like in the first half of the episode, which was my favorite. I think you said it's your favorite also. It felt like, oh, maybe that's going to be an idea that's developed on. Maybe there's some history with this guy that we don't know yet. There's something here, and then he's absent for almost the entire last half, and then he just shows up, and then he's just basically executed by Ryan in a bizarre moment, and then he's gone, and he's never referenced again. I have no idea if he's going to come back in the future, but he just gets zapped out of the episode when it's most convenient for him to just be gone. And it's so, like, it feels kind of like you said, it feels like either they wrote in a gap in the script and it's like, we're going to fill in villain stuff later, or they had a script that had no villain, and then at the last second they said, well, what if we like put the villain in these places?
Yeah, it's bizarre. Like, I actually, in my notes, wrote about him as, I said, rogue time agent several times until we found out he was a prisoner, because I just assumed he had all the Jack Harkness gear. I thought that's where they were going with it. Because that at least is a character you can scaffold on, right? Like, maybe this was a guy who had some sense of justice, and it got thwarted over time, and then you could tie back into the Jack Harkness thing, because we know Jack Harkness has not been on the show since season 4, but writers do like referencing him from time to time. Chris Chibnall was the showrunner on Torchwood. That's kind of where I thought they were going with it. I didn't need them to go with that. Anything, good would suffice, but that at least would be, I don't know, again, more of a character you could scaffold on other than racists in space, which is basically what this episode is. So yeah. I don't know. It's bizarre. Apparently they're not doing anything with any, classic Doctor Who villains this season. And I'm actually thinking, normally I would be like, cool, I like the idea of that sometimes, where we go a season and just have new villains. They've been doing things like that since very early in Classic Who every once in a while. Like the early Tom Baker seasons don't. Outside of his first year, then the next two did nothing with Daleks or Cybermen or anything like that, and that's often a very fruitful time for creativity. I'm kind of I'm jonesing for a Dalek episode or something, because I feel like it's a lot harder to write the Daleks poorly. I don't know. I shouldn't say that. There's a lot of bad Dalek episodes, but at least you know what a Dalek is. At least they have a purpose for being in the story that you as the writer do not have to come up with. Other than they want to do something evil, their evil is easy to write. And I'm it's kind of like you've got to walk before you can run, fuck it, maybe Chris Chibnall, maybe I need to see you do the Daleks before you can make your own villains. Because it's that's Doctor Who 101, and you're at 201, and you're not doing 201 right. I don't know.
Yeah.
What else to go through here? Again, the Banksy joke was very good. I feel like bringing it back the second time was maybe a mistake, because I liked the way that it's played the first time. It's very ambiguous whether the Doctor is making a joke. The second time she's teasing, and then it's very clear it's a joke. And I like the idea that the Doctor just might be Banksy. It's one of those moments where I could see a flash of Peter Capaldi in there, who would say it and you would have no idea whether or not the Doctor was joking. Jodie Whittaker nailed that moment. What are other... let's talk about things we liked. I don't want to be too down. I liked that. I thought there were some sweet moments between Graham and Ryan, and Graham being protective of his grandson. I liked that. I don't know. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, this was, you kind of said it earlier, but this is the episode, and the thing I liked about it, and the reason why, at the top of this conversation I said I'm not maybe as down on this episode as you are, is that, this is the first of these 3 episodes that feels we have a TARDIS crew, and it is meaningful in the episode, and it doesn't just feel like juggling characters of your main cast and not having any idea what to do with them. And so it's Yaz is still definitely the most underserved, but in a way that didn't feel why is she even in this episode? In a way that felt okay, we're going to find out more about her later, and I'm fine with that, because she participated in this episode in a way that she really didn't in the other 2. And so she has some moments where she interacts with different characters. She does a thing in the plot when she's with Rosa Parks at when she was at her shop or whatever. And then you have Ryan and Graham. Graham has quickly now pulled out ahead of the other 2 as being my favorite of the 3.
Easily.
The first episode I was pretty pro Ryan, because I liked him, and it felt like they were setting him up as the main companion. Now I'm all about Graham all day, every day. I think he's very funny. I think Bradley Walsh, the actor, is really good at balancing the character being funny and also being very human and relatable and fulfilling that kind of companion role. And the one thing that worked for me about the finale, which is, I think the finale of the episode was mostly bad, is I did like the moment where Graham tries to leave and the Doctor says, no, we have to be here for this. And Graham's just I don't want to be here for this. I don't want to contribute to this. And the Bradley Walsh really communicated something in that moment that's fucking right. Yeah, that would be real rough to have to be party to something in history that is so abhorrent, and is that was the only part of that dynamic that worked for me, is I think that character works so well. So yeah, I think, and then Ryan.
Can I just say, Bradley Walsh and Jodie Whittaker are also extraordinarily good together. I think they have the best chemistry of any 2 people in the cast right now. When they are in the hotel room and Yaz and Ryan have to leave because the police officer has come, and they're sort of play acting a couple, they're very funny together.
Yes, yeah. So that's really good. And then Ryan, gets again like this episode has like like at least a scene for everybody because then Ryan has the scene where he meets Martin Luther King and all that shit. And so it's like that
scene is so bad.
It's the scene is very like it kept on feeling like I was like, oh, they're doing this okay, and then they would take another step. It's like why you if you had stopped at that line, then it would have been fine. But like at least. Like, even if the specific scene wasn't great, it was like kind of like what we were saying with Russell T Davies. Like, at least the structure was there in a way that was not for the past 2 episodes of you have balanced these different characters. And in fact, the one character that I feel was kind of underserved in this episode was weirdly the Doctor. And I felt like, and partially this is something that you alluded to, is I am very frustrated at this point that, like, I feel like Jodie Whittaker has only had the opportunity to be one very specific mode of the Doctor, and she gets to move a little bit outside of that bubble when she gets to confront Space Racist Man, and that's a really cool scene where she gets to be, again, a little bit different. We get to see a different side of the Doctor than we've seen before, but generally speaking, there's just not... Like, Chris Chibnall just doesn't have any dynamism in how he writes the Doctor, and the Doctor typically being, like, an extremely dynamic, like, compelling, strange character. It just feels like we are really stuck in this like manic jokey mode. And it's like, I want to expand that, like do something new with it. Cause it's been 3 episodes in a row where it feels like the Doctor is manic and jokey. It's like, you get a couple of moments outside of that, but not enough for me.
Yeah. It's kind of, you described it last week that her kind of default mode is sort of like Mrs. Frizzle from the Magic School Bus. And
yeah.
that's great. I think as like your default mode. And I think it's a good characterization that Jodie Whittaker plays very well. But the thing about the word default is that it implies there's another mode, And yeah. I think, like, so far, Chris Chibnall writes the Doctor like the non-showrunner writers write the Doctor in a typical season, Where, like, usually, like, let's say it's Russell T Davies or David Tennant. If it's one, or David Tennant, or Stephen Moffat is what I meant. One of those 2 writers. When they're showrunner and you get... like one of their episodes, you see the showrunner's name, you're like, okay, there's probably going to be more characterization for these people in this one, right? And you're generally probably going to cut a little deeper with the Doctor. And people who are not the showrunner can do that. Neil Gaiman did that in The Doctor's Wife, and it would be pointless to list all the writers because many writers do this. Jamie Matheson in the Peter Capaldi years.
Yeah.
But sometimes you get someone like the easiest punching bag here is Mark Gatiss, who just writes the Doctor in one mode. But usually that's okay because it's like an off episode. It's a lighter episode. You don't worry about it as much. And it feels like the Doctor is maybe more on autopilot this week. But that feels like the main position of the showrunner right now. And that makes me kind of scared. Because that's the person who should be going deepest with this character. And again, it's only 3 episodes. But I don't know. It feels like the kind of thing where, clearly Jodie Whittaker can do more than this. We know that. Like, we've seen her in other things, and also I think she's just good enough at this stuff to heavily imply that there's more. And when we see scenes like the confrontation here, or some of the moments last week where there was more dark stuff, like, she's very, very good in those moments, but they've been glimpses so far, not full scenes. And I think part of it is the Doctor both feels underwritten and overused to me. Like, underwritten in the senses of we're talking about, but overused in that the Doctor kind of shows up at, like, every critical juncture of every adventure in these first 3 episodes to, like, save the day. And I feel like the agency of the companions is kind of muted in that they're all there, but they're mostly there to watch the Doctor being the hero rather than being an active participant in the Doctor's heroics, which is how the companion is usually written. Like, the companion will often do things completely separate from the Doctor that help save the day. And here it's like... the Doctor is just the omnipresent captain of the ship, and it can be a little suffocating when the omnipresent captain is also kind of written one note. You know what I mean?
Yes, 100%. And it's one of the things that is, tricky, I think, about them trying to do this 4-person TARDIS thing, is that the only time that has been done consistently well in the history of the show was the first Doctor era. Because, like, the 5th Doctor played with it, and there are good 5th Doctor stories, but a good 5th Doctor story was always good in spite of the fact that there were, like, 3 fucking companions on top of the Doctor.
We did Kinda for our classic Doctor Who rewatch kind of thing, And what they do with that one is one of the companions is just in the TARDIS the whole episode, and we never see her.
Right. Yes. Yeah. They write Nyssa out of that episode basically, and so they're like, well, there's one down.
Yeah.
Like, because it kind of feels like a lot of times, and this is definitely kind of what the situation we've been in with Yaz, particularly for the past 2 episodes, is that like a writer just has to sit down and be like, okay, what does this character do? How can I preoccupy this character for some point of the episode? Have the actor be on screen, give them a couple lines of dialogue, but like just like deal with that character, and then I'll deal with this character, then I'll deal with this character, and then now I get to write the story with the Doctor. And that's kind of how the 5th Doctor era worked. It was like, I have to kind of get rid of these other characters, and then now I can have the story with the Doctor. How the 1st Doctor era worked was that, generally speaking, all the different people in the TARDIS, maybe Susan to a lesser degree because she was definitely a bit more sidelined in most of the stories, but for sure the Doctor, Ian, and Barbara all had like basically equal agency in most stories. And if it was weighed in any one direction, oftentimes it was Ian that had the most agency and was the most active in individual stories because he's like, you know, a big, strong, punk man guy who gets to do action bullshit. That's how it kind of worked back then. But, you know, you were able, like when we did the Aztecs, all of the different members of the TARDIS team have their own plots that are all ongoing, that spread out like a big web and then converge back in at the end. And they're like little times when they hop onto each other's tracks. But generally, you know, the Doctor's dealing with his shit with his love interest. Ian has his whole fucking Aztec gladiatorial bullshit he's dealing with. And Barbara has been like mistaken for being the goddess of whatever. And so she's dealing with that. And so all the different TARDIS team members all have their own fully dedicated plots that could be the stories in and of themselves, and they jump onto each other's tracks because each character has the capacity of being the lead character in their own right because the Doctor was not so overpowering. But they're still writing the Doctor in the same very overpowering model that the Doctor has been written, particularly in New Who, where it's like, you know, the Christopher Eccleston, David Tennant, Matt Smith, Peter Capaldi are all like leading, for them, leading men. Now we have a leading woman, but like they're leading characters that are like strong, hugely charismatic protagonists around which everything else swirls. And that's kind of how the Doctor has been written. And it feels like the Doctor is still in that mode, but the Doctor can't be in that mode all the time if you want to have these 3 other people. And I think that's one of the issues we've seen, you know, that either, or like, it's not either or. It's like always, all the characters kind of get fucked up because none of them have quite the role that they need to have in the story. And honestly, I think, as you were kind of saying, if they cut back on the Doctor a little bit, you'd probably find more space to make the Doctor more interesting and characterize her more fully, and then also give everybody else more space. Because my favorite moments in this episode, generally speaking, were kind of actually the moments that Jodie Whittaker wasn't involved, because it was like, you got to do something that was different. You got to see something new. You got to see, like, Yaz have a scene. You got to see Graham have a scene. Got to see Ryan have a scene. And all those were scenes I had not yet seen in this 3-episode run. Whereas, like, most scenes that had the Doctor involved, I felt like I had seen those scenes other than the confrontation between her in the space races.
Absolutely. I agree with that 100%. I keep seeing people say, like, Doctor Who is an ensemble again this year. No, it's not. In the technical, the theoretical definition of the word ensemble, you don't have one core protagonist. This is not an ensemble. It is a protagonist, the Doctor, with 3 supporting characters. That's fine if you know how to write it that way, but it's not an ensemble. The only time Doctor Who has had an ensemble is exactly what you're pointing out, where in the Aztecs, the Doctor is not the protagonist in, like, the technical, theoretical sense of the word. It's Barbara's story, the Aztecs. Yeah. And then you have other characters, and that's why it can feel like an ensemble, because in the episode before or after the Aztecs, somebody else is filling that role, and you're bouncing around those characters, and it is an ensemble television show for those moments. Doctor Who, past that point, is generally not an ensemble television show, and again, that's fine. Clearly, we love most of the history of Doctor Who, and it's not. But I think it's that, not quite knowing how to balance the 4 characters, plus they're doing the thing this year where they're doing no 2-parters, and every episode is 50 minutes long, and while that's a little bit longer than individual episodes in previous seasons, every episode winds up feeling just undercooked, and like there's not enough there, because in those 50 minutes you're having to tell a full Doctor Who story and service a 4-person cast, and I'm not sure that can be done well in 50-minute chunks. And if it can, it's not going to look like this. This is what I said when I heard about their plans last year, is that, oh man, if I were writing Doctor Who with 4 characters and 10 episodes a year, I would do 5 2-parters. because that would be the pretty much the exact length of like a Tom Baker serial onwards, where they tended to be 4 episodes. And then you would have plenty of time to develop what you needed to develop and give substance to what you needed to give substance to. This feels like kind of the opposite of that. And I don't know. I mean, I would not want to watch 2-parters at this quality of writing because they would probably be interminable. But it would at least force you to try to come up with a better story. Like, I don't think it's any coincidence that Chris Chibnall's best story so far is his one and only 2-parter, which is the Silurian one, because it kind of forces you to figure out what you're doing. It's a focusing kind of event. And I know there are things that belie that, like that horrible Daleks in Manhattan 2-parter. But, I guess that's where I'm feeling on the ensemble quality that is not quite there so far.
Yeah, no, I completely agree, especially because it was something where it felt like Moffat in season 9 in particular really cracked the modern Doctor Who 2-parter, because so many modern Doctor Who 2-parters have like some major structural issues and never were able to really balance themselves that well. And it felt like Moffat's approach as a showrunner was this kind of like 2-parters that aren't 2-parters, where you had like, Under the Lake and Before the Flood, or you had, the best one is The Girl Who Died and The Woman Who Lived, that is a 2-part story, both those parts written by different people, and like set in different time periods, but those 2 stories are like in direct conversation with one another. They build on each other, and they like feel like here's this like great 2 hours basically of television, without it feeling like this kind of like plotting mess that a lot of the pacing of traditional 2-parters could have been. And that would be the kind of thing of like, if maybe this episode was a little bit better, but also if like next episode we knew we were going to like revisit this space racist guy and like figure out who he was, make him a compelling character, like deal with this massive fucking thing hanging at the end of this episode that Ryan just straight up murdered this fucking dude. If we never see him again, the dude's fucking dead, right? So like, it feels like there's an opportunity to do something like that here, and they really just. This episode has the most abrupt fucking ending like any Doctor Who episode has ever had. I kept on waiting as we were like rolling in of like, they have to have a scene in the TARDIS where we unpack all this stuff, right? Like we've had like all these kind of heart-to-hearts between our different companion characters and stuff. This is a pretty like, even if you don't think it was that well done, like it is a pretty like emotionally stressful episode because it is dealing with racism. It's like we really need to have these characters have their fucking TARDIS scene at the end of the episode where they unpack everything. And it's like, no, you just have this weird, like, again, the Doctor reading the fucking Wikipedia article about the Rosa Parks getting the medal in 1999, and then here's an asteroid named after Rosa Parks, which is like, it's real, and it's like a nice gesture and like thought to put that in the episode, I guess, but I don't know if like, I don't know what that is. I don't know what you're saying with that. Like, I don't know why that's more important than the medal. It's like, here's the asteroid.
They're trying to do, like, a weird spin on the ending of, like, Vincent and the Doctor, where it's like, we're going to end by, like, celebrating this person's life. But that works in Vincent and the Doctor because Vincent is, a really vivid character with a real sense of interiority, which Rosa Parks in this episode is absolutely not. Like diametric opposites there in how they've characterized these 2 people. And Vincent van Gogh at the end of that one is also an active participant in the ending of the episode and the celebration of his life. So, like, you can't do that in the same episode where you gave Rosa Parks 0 characterization and she's not party to any of this at the end. Like, okay, yeah, President Clinton did give her a medal. She does have an asteroid named after her. What does that actually tell us about her human accomplishments in this episode? Nothing. If it's something that we could go see in the first paragraph of her Wikipedia entry, I would argue it's not the most substantive thing you could do about this person in narrative fiction.
Yeah, and it's a really good comparison to the Vincent and the Doctor thing of, imagine how just like thudding the conclusion of that episode would be if the ending of that episode was the Doctor and Amy going back and being like, and just walking up to the art gallery and being like, his paintings are really nice, huh? It's like, yeah, everybody loves his paintings. His paintings are great. And then the episode was just over. It's like, what? I mean,
and it pans, pans over to someone with Starry Night socks. And that's how we end the episode.
And it is the thing of like, I mean, yeah, I know. Great, yes. cool. Like, yes, Vincent Van Gogh, awesome. Like, Rosa Parks, awesome people. Like, and they deserve to be rewarded and awarded these medals and be recognized and, you know, put into human history as the name of this asteroid. That's cool. What the fuck does that have to do with, like, the narrative content of this story? And you know, I wouldn't want them to just repeat the scene from the end of Vincent and the Doctor, because that would be weird in a totally different way if you just had, like, and see, Rosa Parks, they named an asteroid after you. Which also, maybe that scene would actually be fucking hilarious with their version of Rosa Parks, because I don't think she would give a shit.
No.
But yeah, it's just like a weird... Yeah, because then you have that scene and then the episode's just over.
It's just over.
And there's no... The characters never talk to each other. None of the characters unpack any of the events of what unfolded. It doesn't feel like, you know... I mean, maybe this will feel different when we actually watch the next episode, but I'm not left with the impression that, like, the events of this episode hang on these characters, because I don't know how they feel about any of it, because we haven't spent any time. It's just like we get this one really awkward scene in the TARDIS interior. It's the only time we see the TARDIS interior in this episode, and the TARDIS interior looks fucking awful in it, which is disconcerting. And then that's it. And then the episode just stops, and it feels so abrupt and sudden.
We do technically see the TARDIS interior at the beginning, before they get off.
Very briefly, yes. But I don't remember how it looked in that scene, but I just remember when you cut into the TARDIS interior at the very end of this episode, and it's just like, it looks like we have cut to a bad set on Power Rangers. Like, it looks awful. It doesn't communicate anything of what I want the TARDIS interior to communicate, and it's really disconcerting for me in this context more than last episode, because this is like a normal episode of Doctor Who. This is the first, like, normal episode of Doctor Who we've had that isn't trying to deal with setting up something of, like, we're getting the TARDIS back and we're, like, introducing this version of the character. This would be... You could set this episode 3 episodes later in the season. You could have this be the penultimate episode of the season, presumably, unless they do some big story arc thing all of a sudden. There's nothing about this episode that needs to be episode 3. It's just a normal episode of Doctor Who. And so seeing the console in that context and it looking so just... I felt it looked so bad in this episode. Really is upsetting to me.
Yeah, let's talk about something more substantive than that, though, for a moment. I mean, TARDIS interior is important. I don't want to say it's not.
It's very important, asshole.
But we need to talk about the climax of this episode. It's one of the most problematic things I've ever seen on Doctor Who, because what the plot boils down to is that evil, racist time travel guy is trying to make minor alterations to the timeline so that Rosa Parks will not have the chance to do her impromptu bus boycott. Sorry, not bus boycott, sorry, but bus protest when she is told to get up for the white person. So what the Doctor and friends have to do is run all around Montgomery, manipulating people and events so they will be put in place so the events can happen as they happened in history. Now, if I just explain that as like, okay, this is just a thing that happened on Doctor Who once, it sounds kind of benign on its own. You know, that kind of thing has happened on Doctor Who before. There have been times when characters have, like, not exactly, but where characters have had to, like, not interfere in history or try to keep history going. Yeah. You know, like Fires of Pompeii is an episode that is about, you know, we cannot actually save the people. We have to let history play out the way it played out. The way this is the Doctor and friends actively have to make the history happen. And the thing that happens to Rosa Parks that allows her to do the thing she does is directly precipitated by the Doctor and friends. Which means, one, you rob Rosa Parks of virtually all agency in this story, because the story becomes not in any way about Rosa Parks' bravery in standing up to the systemic racism of the American South in the 1950s. It is about the heroism of the Doctor and friends putting everything in place so Rosa Parks can be their pawn and do what, in this vision of the story, she is just programmed to do. Because actually, it doesn't happen the exact way it happened. She's got 4 friends with her on the bus who are the people having to sit down and, like, they could talk out for her and all these things. And she sees them right there. And so, but she still reacts the exact same way, again, as if, like, she's an automaton in all of this and not a person. And what you do is you take all of Rosa Parks' narrative agency away. You give it primarily to a white woman as the main character of the episode. And yes, the Doctor has a black friend now. That does not make it okay, just to, like, ward off those comments before we get them. You know, so you put that in the Doctor's hands, and all the agency of going into the creation of this historically important event is now in the hands of an alien time traveler who is the protagonist of a silly sci-fi show. We love this silly sci-fi show, but that's what it is. Doctor Who is not as important as real-life Rosa Parks. And this episode makes fictional Doctor Who more important than real-life Rosa Parks. Fuck that. It is fucked up. And, like, to degrees where, like, I wish I had more time to think about this and write about it and pick apart all the ways that is problematic. And I don't think I, as a white guy born in 1992, can fully pick apart all the ways that is problematic. But this is my best attempt at it. It felt wrong watching it to me, and I was cringing a lot.
Yeah, and it's something of, it's like it does the exact opposite of what the Steven Spielberg movie Lincoln does. Where my favorite thing about that Lincoln movie is that it makes that moment in history that we know so fucking well about the Emancipation Proclamation and the Amendment and, the end of the Civil War and Abraham Lincoln's role in all of that. It was something we just know. If you live in America, you're told that story billions and billions and billions of times as you go through education. And it makes that moment of history so alive, and it makes you so palpably aware of that, like, how much work and energy and just brilliance had to go from Lincoln and all the people that worked with him to have, like, the version of history that we understand work out the way it has so far, and not have America in 2018, as bad as it is. At least we don't have slavery, right? Like, we're not, like, enslaving fucking Africans anymore. So, like, there's some, like, quality improvement there from what Abraham Lincoln did, and that's, that makes that moment in history alive, where you feel like, oh, it could have tipped the other way. Like, if Abraham Lincoln and the people working with him had not done what they had done, been as courageous and again, brilliant as they were in that moment in history, all this could have fallen apart. And it makes that moment in history feel like it is happening to you right now, which is, I think, probably, like, the ideal for what you want any sort of historical drama to really do. And this episode is the exact opposite of that, where it feels like there's never any question of, like, of that drama and of that intensity and of, as you say, the intense bravery of Rosa Parks having to do all of this. Rosa Parks and the rest of the NAACP and everybody else protesting these buses and dealing with this and fighting for civil rights. It doesn't engage with any of that drama. It doesn't investigate the internality of those people and their personalities and their struggles and who they are. Instead, like you said, they are automatons, or it feels like Westworld or something, where it's like they're just going about their business and they will just do what they do. And oh no, bad guy comes in and is like, change, like putting this chair a little bit just to the left or whatever, like whatever he has to do to get, like, the circumstances of the environment to change. And then these automatons will react slightly different to the change in the environment. And it starts robbing them of, like, a human soul. And it starts seeing them as basically being like amoeba, which is like, whether or not you're a cynical bastard like me and feel like, well, maybe people are kind of like amoeba and then they react to their environment in that way. That's not the way you do this fucking story. That's not the way you do any story. And it's like, robbing them of this agency of who they are, and saying that they're just reacting to stimuli in their environment, which is what this story is basically implying. And what you need is to have the Doctor put the right stimuli in the right place to get the history to act the way that she needs it to happen. It just removes, as you said, any agency from the principal people that the story is about, the real people that the history is about, and it removes them from the equation. And it's particularly bizarre for Doctor Who to do this, because Doctor Who has never fucking done this. It's like, this is not how any historical has ever treated time in Doctor Who, ever. They've never done the thing of history is so fragile, and, like, if one thing is out of place, all of history goes kaboom. It's almost always the exact opposite, where the Doctor, or generally the Doctor's companion, desperately wants something in history to be different, but doesn't have the power to change it because too much in history is fixed. That is certainly what New Doctor Who has been. That's generally speaking what classic Doctor Who's opinion on history was. And it's generally, I think, a much better framework for exploring those stories, because it kind of removes the question of whether or not history has changed, and thus, like, inherently avoids this very problem, and thus makes it so that the history has to be about the people, because it has to be about their story of how they're making it. It's not about the story of everybody else playing around with time so that the scenario works out the way that they want it to work out. It's so weird to me that this episode of Doctor Who decided that to take this other tack and just do this. You know, there are other time travel stories that do those kinds of things, but Doctor Who has just never done it like that. And it feels so incongruous with Doctor Who's like general take on time in history. Whether or not that like makes sense in the real world, I don't care. Like, this show has a very clear perspective and focus on how it tries to tell historical stories, whether they were true historicals or are newfangled like modern Doctor Who historicals. It's not about like setting up the historical situation and letting the gears go and like the clockwork work. It is about the people in that moment and the lives they lead, and that, you know, even if you desperately want to make it better for them, that's not something you can do. And it particularly stands out to me that there's none of these people ever question. Like, Ryan never sits down with the Doctor and asks, hey, Doc, why don't you just actually fix all this shit? Like, you're a time-traveling alien. Why don't you make it so that, you know, racism isn't a thing anymore? Like, why don't you just, like, you know, like Rosa Parks and Martin Luther King Jr., great. You have some fucking amazing future technology where you could just brainwash everybody or what, like you could do whatever and you could make all this shit perfect. Nobody even broaches that question. Nobody asks that. And so like the entire internal like inherent struggle that is interesting about this time travel stuff of that wanting to try to change history. But of course we live in a reality where it is impossible to change history and it's impossible to put spilled milk back in the bottle. That's always what Doctor Who has been about. And that's so much more interesting to me. And it is so strange that this episode of Doctor Who just decides to go in a completely other direction. And it's weird.
And it's also, like, again, agree with all of that. You're so right. But also, it is just dumb and cartoonish and stupid the way they do the last half of this episode, where it's like he's putting up flyers saying the buses are canceled. Oh no, we better pull the flyers down. Like, he's running around like he's the fucking Hamburglar, like trying to like trick people. And it's like, no. Like, he sends one guy on a fishing trip, and it's like, because this bus driver is more racist than this other bus driver, and there is more significance to that in like the history of Rosa Parks, but like they don't even get into it in the episode, so I don't know why it matters. And it's silly. It is bad drama. It does not work as an episode. It is narratively inept. Before you get into, also, these are real people, and like we should have more respect for all of this and all that other stuff. Like, it's just inept as a piece of time travel storytelling, and boy, it just, again, it is cringeworthy. I guess one way I can say to damn this, Sean, is, and to take a step back, it should be said, this is a British television show for British audiences, primarily, you know?
True, yeah.
And I would assume that British audiences know less about Rosa Parks than we do, but I don't know what is taught in the British school system about that. I can't make bigger assumptions on that. I can only talk of my own experience. But Sean, I want to see if you agree with me here. As an American citizen who grew up going to American public schools, did this episode tell you anything about Rosa Parks you did not already know?
No.
Not a single thing. Like, and maybe some of it, like, I can understand for a British audience that maybe some of the stuff about, like, her being a seamstress would be more unknown. Now, they don't do anything with that, you know? They don't really tell us about, like, her family life or what her day-to-day existence is. Like, those are the kind of things you could shed light on or make a character out of, but they don't do that. So, yeah, like, I guess I don't know what the point is spending millions of dollars making the Rosa Parks episode of Doctor Who if you're going to come out and be like, yeah, I learned all of that in 5th grade. You know? Mm-hmm. Like, at least the Pompeii episode, I feel like I learned more about Pompeii. Pompeii doesn't really matter in 2018, though. Rosa Parks matters in 2018.
Yeah, no, definitely. And it is a, you know, putting, like, the... You know, it definitely, Rosa Parks really matters still in 2018 thing aside for a second. This, like, even just like looking at the history of the show, it is, you know, it is another episode in a long line of episodes that like are set in America that are like, this is what
Doctor Who just should not go to America.
Yeah, going all the way back to the gunfighters with the original, the first Doctor, which I have warmed up to that story a little bit over the years, just because like I know what it is. At least this episode, like, doesn't like aggressively get literally every single detail wrong, which is what the Gunfighters does about the OK Corral, where it's just like, I don't even know what the fuck you're doing with that one. But yeah, it's just, there's a long history of America like being a setting that just Doctor Who doesn't quite have the capacity to handle. I think probably the best it was done was Impossible Astronaut, and that's mostly because that episode looks really fucking cool because they shot in Utah.
It's the only one they actually shot in America, right?
Yeah, I think so.
This one was shot in South Africa. I mean, the production design is fine. The mise-en-scène is fine. I don't think it's extraordinary, but it's fine. Like, that part of the illusion doesn't bother me. But yeah, like, they all sound Southern. Or, I mean, they all sound British. They do not sound Southern.
Yeah.
They sound, like, aggressively so at times. Like, the guy they had playing Martin Luther King Jr. was like, that is the most British Martin Luther King Jr. I've ever seen. And the guy who played him in Selma is also British. This is a very British Martin Luther King Jr.
Yeah. It's like, I was actually like really surprised at like that they used Martin Luther King Jr. that way, that I was expecting. I mean, I knew as soon as like you open the door, because you see him like kind of immediately, like, is that's supposed to be Martin Luther King Jr., isn't it? But it's just like you can have an MLK cameo in this episode, that's fine. But I just thought it was like, why would you like have like full on, like he's just there, like you at least do like the coy thing of like have him be a little bit in the shadows, you don't quite see his face or whatever, you know, because it's just he's so larger than life iconic that it feels weird for this episode to just kind of like use him like that offhand, like in passing, in a way that's like you just can't. You know, I feel bad for this actor because it's like there's nothing that this actor could do ever, like unless he was, you know, unless they just cast the dude from Selma who could communicate anything about Martin Luther King Jr. in this one little moment, and it just feels odd to even use him if you're not going to do something with it. Either be very coy with it, and that's because you only have him in like 5 seconds, or don't put him in it.
Yeah, I mean, don't put him in it because I don't believe that's historically accurate. That they had meetings like that the evening before her famous protest on the bus, but you know, whatever. I guess that's an okay deal to fudge. It just isn't. It's dramatically inert. So I don't know. Sean, we're 3 episodes in. This is a bad season so far. This is rough. I hope it gets better.
It's not doing it for me.
I mean, it's too bad because I love the actors. I really do. I think Jodie Whittaker's great. I think Bradley Walsh is great, and I like Tossin Cole and Mandip Gill a lot. I want to see more from them, but I don't know. Next week we're going back to modern day UK, and there's going to be an adventure with spiders, and I don't know. And here's the thing, I guess, the most damning thing I can say about it is it really made me want to go watch Planet of the Spiders. It did not make me want to go watch next week's Doctor Who.
Yeah, I'm at least excited that next week Yaz gets her fucking episode. It's like, clearly it's the Yaz episode. We get to see her family, so it's like this character is going to justify her existence.
We'll see.
I also noticed, looking at like the next couple of like plot synopses or whatever, that they are doing this like modern day future historical thing. It's like it's fine to do the stories in that order, I guess, but it's like a little bit weird, like how consistent it is. It's like, you might want to like shake it up a little bit.
Yeah, because Modern Who, Russell T Davies set that in the first season as that's what you do with a new doctor or companion, but you don't keep that loop going through the season generally. Yeah. So who knows? All right. Well, we'll be
one thing I think, because I don't think we talked about this enough. We sort of mentioned it a couple times in passing, but I do want to zoom in a little bit back on when Ryan just fucking ices that dude in this episode, just because it's like this season of Doctor Who has been a little bit weird with the Doctor's sort of like morality stuff, in the way, not just the Doctor, but like the show's morality and how it portrays violence committed by the main characters. And I don't think we really addressed it that much when we talked about the other 2 episodes, but now it feels like it's become this weird pattern where it's like in the first episode, the Doctor, you know, teleports the DNA bombs into Tim Shaw's head, which doesn't make sense. I'm basically fine with the Doctor doing that because it doesn't kill him, I guess. But there's that weird moment where then the guy who Tim Shaw was after kicks him off the crane or whatever before Tim Shaw teleports, and the guy's like, I am special, and the Doctor looks at him and says, you had no right to do that. It's like, you had no right to kick this alien guy off this thing right before he teleported after I blew up 3 bombs in his body. It was just like a weird passing moment. I was just like, that's weird. But then the next episode, you have the whole thing with Ryan where he goes Call of Duty on the robots, and then, who are robots, not sapient life forms, like, you know, they're not presented as being like things that feel pain or anything. It would basically being like attacked by a bunch of evil microwaves, and somebody being like, but don't hit those microwaves with that baseball bat. That's inhumane. Instead, let me set off this electromagnetic pulse. because that's somehow like substantially like morally different than shooting them robots with a laser gun. It's just like another moment that feels like, I get what you're going for, Doctor Who, and the gun thing, okay, but maybe if you're going to do it, come up with a different scenario that actually makes sense for why it's like, don't use the gun, Ryan, like, that's wrong. Instead, like, use your brain and don't use violence to solve problems. Instead, the Doctor just uses more intelligence violence to solve her problems. Because then later in the episode, when they're facing off with the sentient cloth rags that do seem like intelligent life forms that probably do feel pain, she just lights those fuckers up. And it's like, I get that they're evil, but when the episode specifically puts a microscope. Microscope. I kept on wanting to say microphone. It's like definitely not the microphone.
It's because we both have one in front of us.
Yes, it is, but it puts the microscope on the whole, like, violence gun thing. It feels really weird when she then just fucking blasts these fucking things with the cigar immediately, and they all go up in flames, and kills all these things that actually seem way more intelligent than those robots were. So another weird moment. And then you have this episode, which is the most bizarre of all. Because when it happened, I thought for sure this is going to be a big thing. At the end of this episode, the Doctor's going to find out what happened, what Ryan did, and it's going to be really upset, and it's going to be a whole arc, because it carries on from the Call of Duty thing from episode 2, and it's going to be this big thing. Because Ryan takes the guy's blaster that the Doctor got back, and he says he set the dial all the way back to the past as far as he could go, and then zaps this dude with the time dislocator, which is literally exactly what the Weeping Angels do to kill people.
Yes.
So it's like already we have a villain that does this. That's like the scariest, like most evil new villain in all of Doctor Who. Ryan does this exact same thing. Yes, he's a space racist, but fucking does it to him. And then the episode never addresses it again. And it's like I mean, I don't know what the range of this time dislocator thing is in the past, but if you put him back, like 20,000, 30,000, 50,000 years, that dude is dead. Like, that dude is so, like, you probably dropped him in the middle of the fucking Ice Age. He's fucking dead unless you go back in the TARDIS and save his life, which I thought was going to be the end of the episode. I thought for sure the end of the episode was going to be getting in the TARDIS, going back in time, capturing that dude, and then putting him back in Storm Cage, and that would be the whole, like, denouement, and he would get one last, like, sparring match with the Doctor where the Doctor sort of like verbalizes the message of the episode, but that never happens. And Ryan does tell the Doctor, like, I used this thing and I zapped him and I put the dial all the way back, and the Doctor just kind of goes like, oh, okay, and then it never comes up again. And it's so bizarre to me because it is easily like, again, the guy is the villain, he's a fucking asshole, but it is easily the worst thing I've seen any of the main characters do to anything. Is like, you can't just fucking send a dude back like tens or hundreds of thousands of years in the past and just leave him there. That's fucking murder.
Yeah, it's also, this guy would be really easy to defeat. All you need to do to just, like, immobilize this guy is put handcuffs on him. Like, she doesn't have a pair of handcuffs or something in the TARDIS, or fucking rope. You get a rope, he's done, because he can't do anything. Like, he literally can't commit violence, so all he can do is go around and, again, be the fucking Hamburglar putting up things on the wall. He's very easy to defeat. He's not very menacing. You do not need to use maximum force against this guy. I don't get it.
Yeah. Like Ryan could have just fucking punched him out and, like, thrown him in the trunk of the car, you know?
Yeah.
Like, that would still be violent, but you wouldn't be murdering this fucking dude. And it just seems so bizarre for Doctor Who, almost any Doctor era of Doctor Who, to do this. Like, maybe, like, the 7th Doctor could ice this dude, and I'd be like, yeah, that seems like something the 7th... Like, if the 7th Doctor did this, the guy would be off light because his family would be safe, you know? It's like, you're lucky that he only sent you just back in time, right? But other than, like, those couple little moments where Doctor Who's gotten very dark with some of its characters, it is very weird for Doctor Who to do this, and it's especially weird for this version of Doctor Who that took great pains in the first 2 episodes to, like, point out that, like, this Doctor is about nonviolence, that this Doctor is not about kicking people off of cranes, or is not about using guns. Again, those episodes are both inconsistent with that treatment in and of itself, but not as wildly inconsistent as this instance is, and is, like, only because the Doctor doesn't do it, but it's, like, only, like, a little bit below in fucking Dinosaurs on a Spaceship, another Chris Chibnall episode where the Doctor just fucking shoots the old dude out into space and blows him up with missiles. It's like, you're not quite that bad, but you're almost there.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. It's Chris Chibnall, I think, has a very inconsistent relationship with the core tenets of like what Doctor Who is, or like what he wants those core tenets to be, because I don't even really know what his vision is for the show. Whereas most showrunners or script editors, if you named them, I could list off 10 things about kind of what their core vision of Doctor Who is and what is and is not consistent about that, usually more consistent than not. There's nothing to Chris Chibnall that is like unique, like feels like there's a unique understanding of Doctor Who here, or even like a non-unique understanding of like just kind of the basics of what the character sort of, I don't know, is and is not, because it feels like he plays very fast and loose with them for convenience to wrap up. It's just messy plotting. It's like to wrap up messy plotting of like, I don't want to deal with having an antagonist, so let's shoot him into the past. It's like he's bored with his own stories. That's what's weird to me. I don't know.
No, and it is weird, like quickly running out of rope of the like, but it's only 3 episodes in,
right? Excuse.
I feel like the last 2 conversations we've had to kept on like sort of padding everything we say with, but this is only the first episode.
Yeah.
But this is only the second episode. But it's like there's only so many times you can do that, because Russell T Davies did not take 3 episodes to get going. It took him 1. He did it in rows, and then the second episode's inconsistent, the third episode's inconsistent, but I would take episode 2 and 3 from the first series over either of these easily.
I like this.
Easily.
The third, the first historical of Russell T Davies' era, which is one of the better Mark Gatiss episodes, is the Unquiet Dead, which is the Charles Dickens one. An imperfect episode. There's things I remember and like about that episode an awful lot. Just down to like Charles Dickens is an interesting, fun character in that one.
Yes. And then of course Stephen Moffat with the 11th Hour is just one of the great episodes of modern Doctor Who. Then like The Beast Below, a weaker episode, like certainly one of Moffat's weakest episodes, but like still a pretty good fucking episode.
Yeah. And then you have Victory of the Daleks.
Third one? Yeah, which Victory of the Daleks is Mark Gatiss, but that one's one of the funner Mark Gatiss ones.
It's definitely one of the better Mark Gatiss ones. Yeah, so I don't know. I think the real test for me is going to be these next 2 weeks, because that'll wrap up the Chris Chibnall block, because after that, looking at the math and how many writers are hired, the next 4 should be different writers, and then I assume Chibnall is the finale. But there should be a long break. But if we get through the first half of this season and they're all at this level, then I'm very, 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 very worried for the future of Doctor Who, because that means the core writer of Doctor Who cannot write Doctor Who, and that's a problem. Because these 3 episodes are evidence of... these are not just like mediocre to me. This is, you cannot write Doctor Who. And... like there are Russell T Davies episodes that are worse than any of these 3, like a Love and Monsters. Frankly, there are Stephen Moffat episodes that are worse than any of these 3, like a fucking Name of the Doctor or something. But like, those are also those are also swings for the fences and misses. These, I don't even feel the swing for the fence and miss thing. I just feel that like, I came up to the plate and then I walked off the plate and I didn't really try to swing. Yeah,
because typically, like, for RTD, like Love and Monsters is a weird exception, but that's just a weird episode. But like for RTD and Stephen Moffat, their bad episodes are almost exclusively season finales that like had so much pressure built up around them that like they're still bad episodes. It sucks that they're bad episodes, but like I understand why The Wedding of River Song is a fucking mess episode. It's like it wasn't built up too properly, and he couldn't like totally decide, Stephen Moffat, on how he wanted to resolve the Doctor being killed in a possible astronaut, and like was trying to be too tricky for his own good. It's like a big complicated episode that has the fucking like 11 other episodes of Doctor Who building up to it. That's a hard thing to pull off. But it's like when they just had to write an episode on its own that was just like whatever, it would typically was like some of the best fucking Doctor Who we've gotten. It would typically be like a Midnight or Listen. That's like, this is just amazing. Like, this is huge because the showrunner, who is the kind of like one of, if not the best writer working on the show right now, got to write an episode that had no other pressures on it. That just got to be its own thing. That's kind of what episode 2 and episode 3 of this were. And particularly this episode is like no pressure episode. The next episode, no pressure episode. The episode after that, no pressure episode. Those are episodes that should be big home runs for a writer like Chris Chibnall, because they don't have all this other pressure and external factors that make it like incredibly technically difficult to construct the episode in the first place. And if he's not able to do these, then it's like, you're kind of shit out of luck, because like I don't mind if a season finale is bad. season finales have been bad for Doctor Who for a long time. Like, it's been the whole new Who that has been the default position, and it's a really welcome surprise when you get something like Hellbent in, like, the past couple of years we've gotten with Moffat that were really good. But typically they've been shit, and I'm fine with that. But I'm not fine with your average, like, middle season episode written by the showrunner being bad. That's a really bad sign.
I guess I'll just put it this way. You know, when you're listing off, like, the bad episodes of other showrunners, those are memorable episodes. Even if they're bad, I remember them. In 6 months, I will not be able to tell you a goddamn thing about these first 3 episodes, other than Jodie Whittaker was good. You know?
I like her coat a lot.
Yeah. Okay. And on a positive, she has a red shirt in this one with the rainbow on it. I like that they might be altering that aspect of the costume week to week. The shirt, the color of her shirt, that was cool.
Yes.
So
I was very distressed when she had to rip her coat to do the whole Rosa
sad.
Parks thing. And at first I was like, did you lose your mind, Doctor? What are you doing? That coat is so cool.
it's a great costume.
Yeah.
For a potentially great doctor if she gets the support she needs from the writing.
Yes, I do not want another fucking Colin Baker on our hands. That would make me very sad.
Yes, I don't want her to have to be rescued by Big Finish in 30 years.
That's a good way to put it.
All right.
And a sad way to put it.
We'll be back next week. We will likely be talking Red Dead Redemption 2. We will be talking about a spider episode of Doctor Who, and if we don't like it, maybe we'll just watch Planet of the Spiders and talk about that, because that's a pretty cool episode. It's all like about Buddhism and stuff. I like that one.
It's very good.
We'll see where we go. That'll be next week.
I have to finish Dragon Quest XI.